Hello everyone and welcome to an Inward Bound First IBTV. I'm Ariel and tonight I'm joined by Alex and Jacob. But before we jump into the Endpoint announcement, I feel like it's very important to acknowledge that today we're meeting on different lands all around the globe, and today we pay particular respect to the UN nation where Inward Bound of 2025 race is taking place. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging as we meet on their lands and waterways today. And from wherever you are viewing this, we continue to pay our respects to the traditional owners of the lands where you're meeting from. Tonight, you have us three commentating you to give you a pre-race day and night commentary. I'm Ariel. This is my second year of participating in Inward Bound. Last year, I was right for CC, and I take full credit for the WTF Where's the Finish Inward Bound shirts. And this year, I'm one of the three comms and media officers on the committee. And having never run a day in my life, I enjoy the social aspect of it. I love to talk about it. And obviously here tonight, I love to talk about it even more. And I pass over now to talk about himself, Jacob.
So I'm Jacob. Hi. I've been involved in IB this is now my fifth year. I first got involved in 2021 as a first year, as the shirt suggests, running for Bruce. Obviously 2021 didn't go ahead, but in 2022 to 2024, I not only ran, but also was lucky enough to be coaching at Bruce Hall. And finally last year, we managed to end the drought. I think anyone who knows me will agree that IB is definitely part of my personality. So many would say too much, but I love IB. I love everything about the event. I think it's an incredible event, and I'm really excited to help be part of this world first IBTV exclusive.
And hi everyone, my name's Alex. This is my third year with Inward Bound. I spent the first two as a runner, and this is my third on committee. I really have felt very lucky to be part of IB. I think it's such a unique event that ANU has, and I love how it empowers people to become better runners, better athletes, and feel more confident with themselves overall. And it's definitely become my new personality, so I can attest to the power of IB. We're very excited for tonight, and I think we have a lot to go over. So with a quick overview before we get into things, just about what you can expect from tonight.
Basically, as we said, this is the first time we've done something like this, so bear with us, please. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to start with what everyone's really here for, announcing where Endpoint is. And then we're going to do a bit of what actually is IB. Obviously, not everyone is as obsessed as we are. And so Alex is going to give a brief overview for maybe parents, family, friends who are watching this at home thinking, what on earth are you guys doing? Why is this so exciting? And Alex is going to convince you why it is so exciting. We then are lucky enough to have an interview with the course setters this year, who are going to talk us through the course, their highlights. I don't want to say the lowlights, but maybe some of the more difficult sections of the course, and what to look out for. And then finally, Alex and I are going to do a div by div route analysis. So where's the best way to take? Where are teams going to get lost? As well as a little introduction to all the teams and runners who are running. Get excited for that.
Before we get into things, though, we'd just like to mention the faces behind the race with the IB committee. Often their work goes unrecognised or is kind of unknown by the wider halls. But IB committee have put in so much volunteer work to make this race happen. And we just wanted to do a quick shout out to the surprisingly large team that it takes to put this event on. Especially mentioning our three race directors who are either full-time studiers or full-time workers who do everything in their spare time to coordinate this. So this year's race is being directed by Matt, Kaz and Cecily, and they've done a fantastic job, and I think you're going to see that when you go to Endpoint this year. And of course, we have the rest of broader committee and all their roles on the slide below. But otherwise, without further ado, I think what you're all here for.
Whoa. I'm excited. You're excited?
The moment you've all been waiting for. Where is Endpoint?
Okay, welcome to our Endpoint Can. This is our new innovation with IB Committee this year, with some help from the Rocketry Club. we've calibrated this new mechanism, which is going to search around the ACT and the surrounds and locate where Endpoint is for 2025, Jacob. So this is very exciting. I see we're zooming out.
Started. Heading out of Canberra. That's always a good sign.
Okay, that's good. We're not going to end up Bruce this year.
That's a good idea. Ooh,
we're heading west. We're heading west.
Cotter?
We've done a couple drops there this year, so there'll be familiar territory. That would work.
Heading over Cotter.
We're really going a bit more north. This is far out. Is that I see Wee Jasper. Jasper.
Oh, it's zooming in. I've heard Endpoint Cam likes the Wee Jasper Pines.
That's true. Lots of great navigation. I think it's kind of locked in. We're going south. No, never mind. And we're going towards, I think, the Brindabellas and Kosciuszko.
Oh, could it be a Gingervine Endpoint?
Oh, that'll be good. Maybe
last.
Too much snow there. I'm not sure if that would be safe, but
global warming is making it more possible.
That is true. Maybe this year. Oh, and we're coming down into the valley.
We're zooming in. Can't be Gingervine. Could it be Kiandra? Selwyn Snow Resort, recently rebuilt. They need that tourism.
Could definitely be possibly. The cemetery is Endpoint.
Right.
No, they're coming out.
It seems to be getting a bit closer now. It seems to be picking up its bearings.
It's calibrating, going above Scabby Range and back to the Magi. Maybe a more local Endpoint.
Aurora. No.
This could be a quick 50-minute drive. I think this might be a really convenient. Honeysuckle.
Surely not again. It can't be. They wouldn't do that to us 2 years in a row, would they?
I mean, it's never been done before.
I wouldn't put it past them.
No, wait. No, we're going east.
It's moving now. It's locked in.
Oh, and
coastal.
We're heading coastal. You know what? Maybe
come on, beach.
This year's the year, perhaps. Come on, more east.
Come on,
more east. Come on.
Really good thing.
Oh, it's spinning up. And we're low.
It seems to be getting it now.
I've got word that it's finally calibrated. It's liking where we are. I think we're officially locked into Majors Creek Recreation Reserve for 2025 Endpoint.
Woo! Majors Creek Rec Reserve. Let's go. So Majors Creek Rec Reserve is this year's Endpoint. Some of you may be familiar with Majors Creek. I suspect many of you will not. Basically, it's a small town that is about an hour and a half, 2 hours drive southeast of Canberra. It's basically a little bit further south of Braidwood, which, if you don't know where Braidwood is, it's halfway to the coast. So Majors Creek was initially a gold mining town way back in the 1800s, and now it's a much smaller town, but it's got a great recreational reserve that features as a great endpoint. So it's been used as endpoint multiple times, in 2006, according to Wikipedia, and infamously in 2012, which to celebrate the 50th year of IB, they had endpoint at Majors Creek. A private property stakeholder pulled out last minute, and all the divisions ran an extra 50K. This also involved John's Div 1, I think it was, running 130 or 140 kilometres over 2 nights. And since then, there has been a much bigger shift to safety. I think it's because of that event, actually, is why we now have trackers. So we can thank, I guess we can almost thank that event for the fact that we now can do IB Live and IB TV and have all this tracking. But let's hope that that doesn't happen again this year. Fingers crossed. So that's Endpoint. We also have a few photos from the course. So we've got some photos here of Majors Creek, of the oval and the approach there on the right. And the waterfalls in the top left corner are the Majors Creek waterfalls that are about 2 kilometres out of town, and teams will all pass by that on their way into Endpoint. It is supposedly a lovely place to go and visit, so if you're looking for a day trip out of Canberra, would recommend. We also have some other photos from on the course. So as you can see, we've got a great mix of vegetation. There's lots of natives. We've got gums, we've got stringy barks. It's quite wet. There are a lot of river crossings, and it's quite steep, as you can see there with Chloe, one of the course setters, modelling how steep some of these climbs are. I'd say be thankful that you're not running, and instead you just get to go to Endpoint and enjoy the atmosphere there.
I've personally visited Endpoint. I've visited some of the drop sites as well, and I can tell you that there is indeed a lot of elevation. Also saw some more animals as well. You can see up there, we've got a frog. We've seen some wombats as well, some lyrebirds, a lot of other nature that can be seen in this area as well.
lots of us take for granted that how Inward Bound works is quite obvious, and that everyone knows the rules. But I know for many tuning in at home, this is their first experience with Inward Bound.
Yeah, personally, I've never run the event, so I've got no idea how to do it.
So what a great time to maybe just highlight some of the rules and objectives of Inward Bound. I mean, exactly how do you win Inward Bound? Is it just a simple marathon race, or are there kind of other things you're meant to be doing? And are we running in teams, or can you split off? What are the rules? So we thought we'd just go through a couple of dot points about how this race works. So first of all, what actually is Inward Bound? Well, according to the ANU website, Inward Bound is an annual navigation-based endurance running event for ANU students in the surrounds of Canberra. So let's break this down bit by bit. So navigation-based. We think of marathons as something that seems quite straightforward. You have a set course, you know exactly where you're running, and you just get to the finish line. But with Inward Bound, it's a bit more complicated from the start. So the navigation comes from the part that teams are blindfolded before they get to the drop point, or basically the starting point. So each division of Inward Bound, there are 7 total, start from different locations in the bush. And this changes every year, hence the course is a mystery up until the day before or right now.
So once teams have been dropped off, the first thing they do is they take off their blindfolds, and then they have to figure out where they are. Some teams do this successfully, some do not. Either way, teams have to pick a direction and run. Now, for teams that know where they are, this is easier. They can plan a route to the endpoint, which is the finish line, in this case, Majors Creek. Teams that don't know have to pick a direction and run, and then figure out where they are on course, usually when they bump into a big road sign that says, "You are here." Again, this could be a good thing for teams. Maybe they've luckily gone the right way. Maybe they've gone the wrong way. In any case, it might then sound quite straightforward. They just have to run to where the finish line is. Well, they have to run on bush trails, on fire trails, on single trails, some of them that in theory exist and exist on a map, but don't really exist very well in real life. The course setters also set little exclusion zones where runners can't run through to make them go around. And it's a lot less straightforward than just simply, oh, we're going that way, let's run. And this is really what adds to the excitement. But Alex, how do teams win?
Great question, Jacob. Now, it's actually not too dissimilar to an actual marathon that you might be familiar with, in that the fastest team wins. So if you get to the endpoint first in your division or your distance, then your college or your team is the winning college. And every team after that gets less points.
Teams have to be careful, because if you go through private property, i.e. run on someone's front lawn, or you lose some of your mandatory gear, so all the teams have to carry safety equipment. If you lose some of that, you can get time penalties. If you get time penalties, then that can push you further back down your div. And even if you cross the line first, you may no longer win.
And the last part we haven't touched on is that this is a team-based marathon. So what you might be familiar with running a marathon by yourself, you know your own limits, you know your own pace, you know exactly how you're going to perform in the marathon, give or take. This is a bit more complicated. So teams are usually members of 4, made up of 4 people. And so you've really got to work together to make sure everyone's on board, everyone's going well to be able to get to the finish line. Because if any one of you get injured or are not feeling well, then the entire team is out. So it really is a team-based sport.
I think personally, this is what makes IB so good, is that it is a team-based sport, because it's not only that you have to, perform and do well for yourself, but also for your teammates. I think that also really can boost you as well. It can give you that boost of running with 3 other people who you're all relying on each other out in the bush, especially during the night sections of the course when it's dark. Like, it's a great bonding experience. And I definitely remember all my teammates over the years.
And we all have different roles, right, within a team?
Yeah. So typically every team has 2 navigators and 2 scouts. The scouts, they're responsible for when teams are first dropped off. They go and they run in both directions along the road and draw a little map to try and figure out where they are. They also look for clues such as road signs, or maybe they've seen, I don't know, a lake or a farm light or something. And they bring all that information back and they try and figure out where they are. The navigator's main job is to, as it suggests, navigate. Usually the navigators are more experienced, having often run an IB before. they're a little bit more confident with the maps, and they usually will kind of lead the team and plot the route to Endpoint. But again, I think the best teams are the ones that can really share the roles equally, and work together the best to get to Endpoint.
Ariel, are you feeling knowledgeable and excited for Inward Bound now?
I'm feeling so excited. I'm ready to get right into it.
Great. Awesome.
Excellent.
Well, bear with us. We're going to go onto the course now and get a bit more bearing with Majors Creek and the surrounding east of the ACT region and New South Wales. So
that's pretty major. All right, now that we've done our Inward Bound in a nutshell, let's take a bit of a deeper dive into the course. So as our endpoint is Majors Creek, that basically means that there's a lot of bushland out to the east between Majors Creek and the coast, and that is where our IB is being run this year. So this traverses through a whole lot of state forests, so Currowan, Shallow Crossing, South Bruman, Buckenbowra, Mogo and Wandera. The obviously quite nearby Majors Creek State Conservation Area, as well as 2 national parks, Bimbaramala and Monga. Now, we'd like to also thank the National Parks and Wildlife Service in New South Wales for all their help with getting access to these trails and allowing us to use these on event day.
We're also using some of the private land around the area, and we'd like to thank those people in particular. We've got Jono and Hamish, Scotty, Saul, Pete, Kelly, Paul, Carol, Conrad, Karen, Billy, Jeremy, Peter, and Taryn. We thank them for using their lands, but we're also using another really cool land, actually.
Yeah, so we'd like to give a shout out to Horse Wisdom Equine Assisted Learning, who are graciously allowing runners to use their property. They're based near Nelligen. I believe their property might be for one of the highway crossings, but I'm not sure, so don't quote me on that. But if you'd like to check them out, use the link on the slide below.
awesome. Now, you may be wondering why this area in particular this year, and that's all to do with the decision of our 3 course sitters who decide everything about the course and where it is. We'd like to just give a quick shout out to them. So Ryan Stocks, Calvin Mang, and Chloe Woodburn have been our course sitters for 2025, and they've decided this wonderful area. I think we all get a bit excited when IB is set near the east of Canberra, near the coast. Just because everyone in Canberra, I think, likes the beach and likes to get away from the mountains once in a while. Now, they have some fantastic insights as to why they decided on this area and some kind of interesting challenges of this landscape that we might see that we might not get from previous years. So to get all this out, we did a quick interview earlier in the week with them. And so we're just going to play a clip now to learn a bit more about that. So we're just recording now, so any comments about that college, we can keep to a minimum. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining me. Today I'm joined by our course sitters for this year in 2025. So I was just hoping maybe you guys could just quickly introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Chloe. I'm course setting this year. I started out running IB for Bruce. I started training in 2020, but because of all the cancellations, I only ran in 2022 and 2023. Last year, I was sponsorship coordinator, and I'm super excited to actually be here to see IB happen this year because last year I was watching from overseas.
Awesome.
I'm Brian. I've loved NAB sport for a very long time. I've been orienteering for more than a decade and have done a lot of rogating. And I have a long but not very smooth history with IB. I ran in 2019 and DNF'd and haven't been able to start IB since. So I'm hoping to break that curse by course setting this year.
Lovely. And finally, we got Kelvin.
Hey everyone, I ran IB in 2022 and 2023, head coached for a bit, and keen to see everyone run our course this year.
Awesome. So clearly a lot of expertise and knowledge on the course setting panel this year from post-COVID and a bit before as well. So as we just announced before, of course, Endpoint's going to be at Majors Creek this year, kind of in the east side of the Canberra region, which is very exciting, or outside the Canberra region. So I guess I want to ask you guys, how did we settle on this area? What was the what were you guys considering when looking for a place to set the course, and what drew you to Majors Creek?
Yeah, so I think I'm mostly to blame for that one. So I think we wanted to use an area that ha hasn't been used for a little while. So the coastal area was used in 2022, but we're hoping to push it up a bit more onto the escarpment so that we don't overlap too much with the previous course. It's an area that I've spent a lot of time and love being in. I've taken people on very brutal bike rides, so my brother is going to be delighted to see that Book Fire Trail is being used as part of the course, even though I don't think he's actually running. But I think I've managed to keep that from him so far. And yeah, it's just a stunning, stunning area that I think people are going to really enjoy.
Mm. I have to agree with that sentiment. It's such a beautiful location, and I think a lot of runners I hear are hoping for Butterwings IB. So hopefully they'll get this as a nice alternative. But we did actually consider a couple of other areas, including the Butterwings and Kosciuszko. But in the end, I think this is probably the best choice out of both of them.
Yeah, definitely. And IB's a event of variety. It changes every year, and people do mock drops in all sorts of locations. And I think it really has a nice kind of contrast to some of the terrain you normally see around Canberra. That's a bit closer. Definitely has more of a rainforesty kind of feel to it. So it's very exciting. Uh, I want to ask you guys what you felt like were the kind of key features and characteristics that the terrain of this course would pit against the runners this year.
In terms of terrain, it's certainly not an easy flat course this year. We have heaps of elevation and different aspects, including multiple river crossings that we mentioned earlier. We have heaps of hills to climb, plenty of gullies to traverse if people dare, and hopefully a lot of variety, as you mentioned, Alex.
Yep, and the runners are going to be treated to some really nice variety on the course. So out near the kind of more coastal areas, there's some really nice, very coastal vegetation, and then kind of coming into, say, some of the gullies a bit closer to Endpoint, it gets a bit wetter. There's a bit more kind of rainforesty feel to it. So hopefully the runners, as they're going through, they'll get to see some really nice, spectacular views, and particularly as they climb up the escarpment. Hopefully they're not hating us too much, and hopefully they do have the time to kind of turn around and look at what's around them, because there's some really beautiful views from out on course.
I think it's also a course that is really going to reward the stronger navigators. There's a lot of opportunities for changing route choices a bit to avoid a lot of the climbs. So some of the routes have up to 500 meters less climb than some that might be just a little bit shorter. And there's a lot of opportunities for cutting things short with some off-track navigation as well.
So you kind of touched on that before, but was there kind of like a overarching philosophy that came to the course and designing it this year? You mentioned kind of giving runners the choice between kind of hills or a longer flat route. Is there anything else runners or spectators should be looking out for as runners are kind of pitted against this?
It could pay off for teams to spend a little bit more time at drop site, really considering the course and planning out a route versus picking something and going for it because it seems like the most obvious choice. So it'll be interesting to see how teams leave drop site and whether they do so quickly or all together, or they're heading out and then kind of stop to consider where they need to go after that. It'll be really interesting to see. So teams can and should be pretty strategic in terms of the start of the race.
Great.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
Yep. Anything else, Colin? Sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to add, like Ryan mentioned earlier, there's a lot of nav decisions along the course, not just from the get-go. So teams are able to stay switched on mentally and hopefully physically throughout the middle part will be rewarded by hopefully more prudent decisions as they head down into the valley.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to keep an eye out for. I think that there's going to be a lot of different sections of the course. So particularly the higher divisions, it might start out a little bit easier where it's a bit more focused on route choice. And then the middle section is where it gets really physically tough. So there's a lot of hills, a lot of potentially bashing down some steep ridge lines, and will be quite tough going in that middle section. And then the end is actually quite easy going. So it's going to be potentially quite fast. So teams that are able to conserve themselves a little bit in that tough middle section and still have some legs left at the end, I reckon could overtake some teams in the flatter regions around through Monga and Reedsdale towards Endpoint.
Is there anything you're excited about our Endpoint this year, and how it might differ from other years?
Thing that's not so unique about Endpoint this year maybe is that Majors Creek has been IB Endpoint before, most recently in 2012. So fun little fact for people watching at home. We've been here before. I don't think there'll be too many people around who ran that year.
Yeah.
I think one thing that is a little bit unique about the IB Endpoint this year is that the approach into Endpoint. So a lot of the teams are going to be taking private properties for the last few kilometers into Endpoint. So there's a nice little track where they actually have to do a little bit of off-track navigation to get between a couple of those properties. And so there's a bit of opportunity for them to slow down a bit there, and they have to remain focused right till the end.
Hopefully, there's a lot of other fun things out on course, like the river crossings, the beautiful forest they run by, the amazing private properties that most runners would never get the chance to see. Some amazing property owners have given us the privilege of through their properties, so we're very grateful for that as well.
Awesome. Chloe, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I think one of the sections that a lot of runners are going to have to traverse is called the Corn Trail. And so if you're looking at the maps when they come out, you'll see that that's about 35 kilometers out from Endpoint. And it's this kind of long single track. It's going to be quite difficult. It's quite a big climb. And hopefully it's a lot of fun. The views are great, but there will be so many teams going up the Corn Trail. You're sure to hear about it when you're watching the commentary tomorrow.
Anything I haven't kind of prompted or mentioned that you guys would want to bring up about the course or highlight?
Maybe just in terms of the runner's experience on course, things that you might not pick up from the maps necessarily. Vegetation animals in the area say when we vetted, we encountered a lot of leeches. So it's quite likely that a lot of runners will be heading into Endpoint complaining about the leeches. So look out for them when you do welcome them home. Help them out.
I think a lot of the trails might be a bit slower going than they have been in other years. So a lot of them are quite overgrown. Fire trails might look even more like single tracks. They remain open because the motorbikes are using them, but there were certainly some that my car wasn't going down while we were vetting, and we did damage on a few of the trails that we did take it down. So yeah, I think that's going to be one of the big differences of previous years is that it's going to be a lot harder going, quite a lot of hills and things that aren't necessarily obvious to the people looking at the maps at home, but it's going to be very hard work for the runners that are out there.
Well, thank you very much, guys, for sharing a bit about the course and your kind of decision making beforehand. I think we're all very keen to see the runners take this on and see if they get lost or absolutely destroy the course, guns blazing into Endpoint. So thank you, and very much appreciate your time.
Very keen
Thanks
to
for
watch
having
them.
us, Alex. Absolutely.
Cheers. Well, we'll see you with Endpoint.
Well, that was great. Getting to hear a bit more about the course. I'm really excited about the course. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to do a bit more of a deep dive. So we're going to go division by division. We're going to look at the teams. So who's running in each division. We're going to look at the drop site. So where the runners are dropped, what they might expect to see and how they might work out where they are, as well as then the different running routes they can take and which one of these are better than others and which one of these are not so good options. So we're going to go through this div by div, starting with div 7.
Yeah, really exciting thing about this div is that we actually have all the colleges are represented running in div 7. So congratulations to all the colleges. And how we've set out these slides is we've written down the names of all the runners. These are subjects to changes. We're filming this almost a week out from the event, so subject to change, anything can happen. And we've bolded some of the names of first-time runners, so congratulations to them. That's a really big achievement. And these also might include some maybe third, fourth, fifth year runners, but still awesome achievement once again.
Yeah, we hope all the bolded ones are running for their first time. If it's incorrect, blame IB Live. Don't blame us. It's not our fault. We do our best, please.
I think with Div 7, it's quite a balanced team in that I think we have a good balance of kind of second year and first year runners. And you would also notice if you know a bit about the coaching teams for the colleges, is there's actually quite a lot of experience in this Div 7. So I think lots of people like to write off Div 7 as, you know, the shortest distance and therefore it's the easiest. Not true at all. Div 7's super competitive, and we've got some really great knowledge here. We've got some coaches from Ursi, so Bella Yates, Abby Kidston from Wright, who has coached previously, Mia Brachetto and Maxine. All great names that I recognise, as well as some others.
Lots of strong head downs there. But I also think, you know, Johns have 4 first-time runners. That could be an advantage. Maybe they're newer, they're fresher, they're more excited, more eager. Maybe that'll get them over the line. I would like to give a particular shout out to Abby out of those. Abby, some of you may know, has had 3, maybe 4 stress fractures over the last few years. And so it's great to see her back running IB yet again. Although we do wish she'd be doing it in a Bruce shirt rather than a Wright shirt. But that's an issue we can take offline, maybe, Ariel.
Big shout out as well in Womba as well. We've got one of the presidents. So we've got Hamish from Womba running for Div 7. I don't know how that workload is, being a president of a college and also training to run for Div 7. I don't know a training schedule, but I can imagine I've seen it's an impressive feat. So congratulations to him as well.
Good commitment. It's good commitment. We also in YKB have Alice, who is an international student, who has come on exchange and decided that, yeah, she's going to run IB, which I think is an excellent idea. Alex, you're currently on exchange. Do you reckon if you hadn't run IB before and you were there as an exchange student, do you think you'd want to do that?
Look, I think my priorities would be slightly different. I'm not sure I'd be waking up early enough to go on those early morning training runs. So, yeah, if someone's able to do both of those at the same time, I think a very impressive feat. We also have a shout out to Max and Berg, who apparently last year had a season-ending skull fracture and is now back in the race, ready to run Div 7 as fresh as can be. So, super impressive.
I'm impressed by that. Well done, Max.
And also to Claudia, also in Berg, who has come in new to IB as a third year and has absolutely nailed the training block. So I think Div 7 is going to be extremely competitive, and it's really up in the air who's going to win this Div. So I think it's a really big one to look forward to.
As we're about to see, I think as well, Div 7 has a lot of interesting route options. And so I think I agree with you, Alex, there. I think this will be a really exciting Div to watch.
That's right. So I think we might get into the drop site of Div 7 just to see how dynamic this Div actually is.
This is where the real nerdiness comes out, I think, as we're going to go through Div by Div and look at drop site, route choices, and how it might play out. So as we can see, Div 7 drop site here, they are dropped on a bend along Monga Mountain Road. It's quite a distinctive bend. But they only have 12 minutes of scout times. So if teams want to pick drop here, they're going to have to be fast with their scout and quite confident in their scouting abilities as well to make sure they get back on time. So scouts running to the north and to the east, will have a nice steep descent here all the way down to the plain where they might encounter this 3-way intersection here in the private property. To get there, I think it's 1.25k. So to get down there and back in 12 minutes will be a fast scout, especially given they go back uphill. But if scouts do get here, I think this is a really good clue to figuring out where they are. Otherwise, they might get close to here and still be able to see some lights from the properties, which might help. And they may be able to hear something about Kings Highway. They may hear some trucks or something rolling past on Kings Highway. Apparently, they are also going to be shuttled from Kings Highway. So I guess clever navs and scouts might remember that they've been dropped off somewhere and shuttled nearby. So maybe that will help them to kind of narrow down their search area.
Yeah, and for the scouts who end up going south on this drop, again, with only 12 minutes, they only really have 6 minutes each way, and we have quite a steep uphill here. So they're really going to be relying on this kind of right kind of hairpin that we see down here. And otherwise, going to the navs, because it's only 12 minutes, the navigators might be less inclined to leave drop site. So we haven't covered it, but not only scouts, but also navigators can leave drop site if they wish to do so. But from the scanning time, although it is a less common strategy, but given the location, maybe if they're lucky, they'll be able to hear some passing trucks on Kings Highway. But again, I think this is going to be a really fast scout. And hopefully they can use this kind of distinct bend and the proximity to the highway to get dropped really easily.
Hard scout, easy scout, or hard drop site, easy drop site. What do you reckon?
Well, I think it's a hard scout. Look, they're going to have to be going really fast. They can't be slacking here. So I think, well, the half asleep scouts from the bus might struggle with this one. But I think there are some really distinctive features. I don't know. What do you think, Jacob?
I agree. I think there's enough experience in those teams to pick it. I think it's a really distinctive bend. And also, as we're about to see, I think it doesn't matter too much which way, if they don't pick it, as most ways out of drop site offer a decent route.
Yeah, I think as we mentioned before as well, the team's Div 7 super strong this year. So you shouldn't equate the low distance for lack of technical skill here. I think it's going to be quite competitive.
Agreed. But let's look at the route in a bit more detail. If we look at Div 7 to start with, we can see they're dropped here on that bend on Monga Mountain Road. And we have kind of two main options for Div 7. So either they can head north, so they can head north out of drop site, taking this black route, and then they turn left here and they head up towards the north part of the map. They can also head north by heading south from drop site along the purple route down through Monga Mountain Road, and again, then following this green route up where it intersects with the black route. This is a little bit longer, but both ways will allow them to come north and then follow this route here that kind of winds its way down through the exclusion zone. This is Tudor Cross Road. And then that comes back down towards Reedsdale, which we'll see later. The other option is that teams can head south. So again, they can head north first and then turn south down here through Monga. This looks a bit longer, and it is. But the other option is for teams, they can either take this purple route along Monga Mountain Road and then head down here along Saddleback Road before then heading back through Reedsdale where they intersect with that northern route. The yellow route is also an option, but this is a single track here, Burma McCarthy's Walk, which is probably a bit overgrown and a bit slower relative to the purple route. The purple route offers one other advantage in that there is the potential for a bush bash. So we have the cutters track here, which is excluded in this section, but not in the lower sections. And so teams could run along here to the saddle, bush bash down this spur. It's quite a short bush bash, and the course setters inform me that it's relatively reliable. And then they take cutters track here to the purple route. And then, as we saw before, that will join up in Reedsdale. Now, from Reedsdale, the rest of the route is quite straightforward. You basically run along Monga Lane for a while, and then turn off into this section of private property through here. So they have to follow a fence and cross it at a stile before getting into Majors Creek Fall Reserve, which is their endpoint approach. They run along that and then head into Majors Creek Rec Reserve as endpoint. And this is the same endpoint approach that we'll see for lots of different divs, so keep that in mind. And so overall, our Div 7 routes, as you can see, there are a few different options, and that's what it looks like.
So going to the kind of wider picture here, there are some different colors used, but this is the same map. So really interesting div. And I think, as Jacob kind of showed there really are two kind of halves to Div 7 to pay attention to. So that first half for Div 7 is really reliant on the nav's route choices. There's kind of a lot of variation. And as you can see from this elevation graph on the left here, we're not seeing much difference between going north or going south. So it will be, it won't be decided purely off navigation. Teams are going to, there are arguably good choices for both north and south routes. But one thing to kind of remember is
there are good choices, but there is one ideal choice. And I think the ideal choice is this black route here. We can see on the distance it is actually the shortest out of all the routes, excluding this bush bash option down here at Cutters Track. and it also has the least amount of climbing by a decent margin. But I do think it's a bit counterintuitive because to see this route up here, teams will actually have to be looking on the north map. All this section here is on the south map. This top little bit here is on the north map. And I think there will be teams that will go too quickly at drop site and miss that option, and potentially, I don't want to say cost themselves a place, but make it a little bit harder, make them have to run a little bit faster.
That's right. I think also good to remember is that, the one time we really have both maps out in IB is at the start at drop point when the navs put them on the floor. But when we're running, we only kind of pick the most relevant map to hold and look at. So if teams don't exactly get drop point and then start on the south map and then kind of figure out later where they are, they might entirely miss that northern route. So that is something to be careful of.
I think. That's a good point. And I also think that, as we said with the drop site, this isn't the most important drop site to pick. If you pick it and you get the ideal route and you go north, great. If you pick it and you choose to go south, great. If you don't really know which way you're going, you'll either get to this intersection if your scouts didn't hit it, or one of these intersections here where there's some road signs, and that should really help them teams figure out exactly where they are. So this isn't a disastrous one if you don't quite get drop site. You're better off just to pick a direction and go in this case.
Yeah, definitely forgiving. And I think the main thing teams are going to have to consider here is how much they want to trash their legs before they get to the second half. So all teams are going to go through this funnel down the end here. So they're going to be going on the same elevation. And because we've got some kind of fire trail and some road here, it's going to be quite flat overall, as you can see with this kind of drop near the end on this elevation profile. So teams that can really save their legs can sprint out.
Yeah, the course setters are really excited for this last section because it's quite open in terms of the roads. And so if you're running and you can see teams up ahead, there might be some really exciting chases. And hopefully we'll be able to watch on IB Live. But yeah, I think that about sums it up for Div 7. Have you got anything extra you want to add?
Yeah, I think just paying special attention to that Sai and Brute, they're going off track, and to see which teams are feeling courageous enough and also smart enough to identify that and take that. Because I think without that Sai part, the green route is less competitive compared to the black route that we highlighted at the start.
That is true. That is true. It'll be interesting. Looks like a great div, lots of route options, and yeah, should be an exciting one to watch.
Awesome. Well, I think further ado, let's go to the Div 6 team rundown.
Good to hear from Div 7. We are now introducing Div 6, and we've got a few new faces in here, and a special shout out goes to the colleges B&G, Wamba and Johns, all full of first year runners. That's going to be really exciting to see on race day. Congratulations to those people. I'm excited to see what they come up with on race day as fresh faces.
We do have a lot of first year runners. We've also got, though, quite a bit of experience with the head navs, I'd say, except for those three colleges. All of the head navs and YKB, but they've got Adam, have run IB before. In particular, I know both Luke and Masake ran Div 2 last year, so they're bringing a lot of experience to this role. So I think that will be interesting to see those dynamics play out across this div.
I think also not to be underestimated is the Griffin Div 6 team. I know in particular, Steph Jones is currently doing their PhD and has been in the IB community for several years now. So I think their team might have some great navs. So one to look out for on IB Live. Moving on to the analysis for Div 6, and we're going to start with the drop site once again. This is kind of characterized by a really distinct hairpin loop here. So I think even navs and scouts will do a really good job to try and identify this off the bat. If we're looking kind of west or south, scouts aren't going to find many intersections here. They're going to find kind of hilly terrain on both sides. And so there is kind of not a lot of distinct kind of human-made features to go off here, other than this kind of hairpin.
Scouts going to be running along this ridgeline. They may, well, hopefully be able to tell it's a ridgeline. There's lots of gullies on either side. And I mean, you can see this little road down here. This is called No Name Mountain Road. Great name, but it's 2.7 Ks away from drop site. Even a fast scout is going to struggle to get all the way there and back. I mean, running 5.5 Ks in less than 30 minutes would be a big choice, especially to then go and run an ultra after that. So teams are really going to have to use their skills. So I think yeah, the key thing is that they're on this ridge line, but also the fact that there are no roads for at least a couple of kilometers is also very much, that's something you can use. Misty Mountain Road is quite a good quality road. So it's not like they're looking for a dashed line, like they're going to be looking for a solid line road. And I think this hairpin, yeah, really is the key. But we'll see how teams go. So Div 6, as we've just seen, I dropped on this significant bend in Misty Mountain Road. And really, this is a very key drop site to get because, as you can see, there is really one main route, which is heading south down here to No Name Mountain Road, and then to this water drop here, which is at the base of what will become, I think, the infamous Corn Trail. So we're going to talk about this a lot, not only with Div 6, but also with some of the higher divs. This is basically a 15 to 20k single track up the mountain, up the escarpment, that is well maintained enough, but is also quite overgrown in places, and will be a feature for a lot of teams during their run. And so, if from the base of the Corn Trail, you basically just head straight up it in Div 6. However, there is another option. Teams who are feeling brave and pick drop site correctly can head north, and then from this little saddle here on Misty Mountain Road, there is the option of a bush bash to the Corn Trail. You can head down this spur here, avoiding the cliff, of course, to the saddle, and then head back up the other side. And then this would probably save, I think, 13 kilometers worth of distance, and so is definitely a good option for a bush bash. And it's important to note that this is really the only place you could bush bash to the Corn Trail. If you go any further up, as we'll see, your bush bash just becomes longer. Any further down, and you're not saving as much. And you also, at both points, don't have this nice saddle, which is a really key, clear place to be able to bush bash across. And so this is definitely an option for intrepid davs. From the bush bash, teams will basically continue running up the Corn Trail, where we have another water drop here at a picnic area at the top of the Corn Trail. And then the only real route choice option in Div 6 comes, where teams can either head south via Monga Lane or north via River Forest Road and Monga Mountain Road through Div 7's drop site. Of the two, the southern route is definitely faster. It's shorter and has less elevation, but this does still provide an option for navigation and may trip up teams that are a bit tired. From there, we see the same endpoint approach as Div 7, so heading along Monga Lane through Majors Creek Falls Reserve and into Endpoint. And then, so that is what our Div 6 route looks like.
I think from this bird's eye, you can really get a sense of how kind of uniform this div really is. So I think from kind of a top-down level, to do well in this div, you're going to have to make 3 really crucial decisions to get ahead, because there isn't much room for mistake in this division. So I think, as we mentioned before, the drop site is kind of hard to identify when you say, Jacob. Like, there's not much to go off, except for maybe the fact that there isn't much to go off.
Yeah, I think it's very much a gettable drop site, but I think teams need to really use their clues. I would say for all of these drop sites, really, there's not going to be any freebies where you get a road sign straight away or something very distinctive. You are going to have to use roads and think about it. And I think teams that do well at drop site will gain an advantage. I think teams who do well at drop site and head north and take the bush bash option will gain a massive advantage, because I can't imagine other teams following them into the bush if they're not quite sure where they are. And if you run north and you're only going to figure out where you are at this intersection all the way up here. And by that point, you kind of have to bush bash, because if you don't bush bash, then you're running an extra, 5Ks back the other way, an extra 10Ks, you're miles behind. And you never really want to lock yourself into a bush bash. You don't want to have to bush bash. You prefer to choose to bush bash. And so I think teams that head north here and know what they're doing will be doing well. I think teams that head north here and aren't sure where they are will have maybe not the best Div 6 experience.
I also think, it's really important they pull off this bush bash correctly, right? I mean, now it is really technical terrain. It is going to be dark, and it is going to take maybe an hour or so given the distance of that bush bash. But we also have to remember with this elevation graph that we're looking here, this black route at the very end, ends 10 Ks before the cyan and red routes, which means that if you take this bush bash, your team is saving about 10 Ks, and then IB time, that can be up to around 2 hours of save time. So even though it's a long bush bash.
10 Ks and 300 meters of climbing as well, because
yes,
if you take the contrail, you have to descend all the way down and then go all the way back up. And I think I agree, it's a hard bush bash. It's not an easy one. However, if you pull it off, it's doable with a good nav, and if you pull it off, yeah, you will give yourself a real advantage. I think the other thing that makes this a hard bush bash is that you're not ending on a big road. Like the contrail exists, you'll be able to see it when you're on it, but as opposed to if you're bush bashing to a big fire road that you could drive 2 cars down, it's very easy to tell when you've got there. And I think at night that's an extra challenge that we'll add here. And I think your other point, Alex, of there are still route choice options even here at this second water drop. I would imagine most teams would take the southern route, but teams are going to be tired, especially if they've been struggling through the bush and haven't had the best time of it there. There's every chance we see teams have a bit of a brain fart and go north, which again could create some exciting sprints along this final section.
Yeah. And I guess this final section as well, if you save 10 Ks of distance, your legs are going to be so much more ready to run that last section a bit faster than other teams. And so, again, we might see some overtakes, especially if you have a hard time of it with the bush bash and you're a bit behind the teams who just went the more traditional route. This is where they might find themselves catching up. So, this will be a very tight div to watch, and I think pretty neck to neck. Granted that many teams take this bush bash. So, I think that kind of sums it up. Yeah.
Are you a fan? Does it make you happy?
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, so I ran Div 6 last year. I've got to say, it's the best Div. I think the vibes on Div 6 are always premium. So, hopefully, it'll be just as good to watch this year.
Would you bush bash?
Look, in theory, looking at this map, of course I'd bush bash. But I think doing it sitting down and then doing it with the adrenaline of being rushed off a bus, totally different experiences. And although I'd like to give myself credit, I think honestly I would totally miss this bush bash on the day of, or even take it and totally stuff it up.
I would also like
there's nothing.
Sorry, go on.
There's nothing more demoralizing than getting lost in the bush with not knowing where you are. I think not only does that take you out of it as a nav, but I think your team also less motivated, and especially if they're going to struggle getting onto the corn trail, that's going to be tough.
Yeah. So I would also say the corn trail, it's not a bush, but it's not easy. They actually have this checkpoint here because the entrance is a little bit hard to see. It's quite overgrown in places. And at this checkpoint here, we're actually going to have a reunion. So it's going to be the Bruce Div 2 team of 2019. Kelvin Pear, a previous course director, along with 3 other runners, Ben Hoffman, Josh Robinson, and Nick Milbrat. 3 or 4 ex-Bruceys who all ran together are going to be stationed there from 1 a.m. to 8 a.m., really doing the graveyard shift at the bottom of the corn trail. So I wonder if teams will be excited to see them or a bit demoralized by the time they get there.
Yeah, time will tell, and we'll have to check in with them after the race. But I think that's everything on Div 6, and we might transition to the Div 5 teams.
Sounds good.
Again in Div 5 we have all colleges coming in again, and we've actually, now that I'm looking at it, we've got every div has almost an experienced runner. We've got Rival, who has all new runners, which will be once again exciting to see. But yeah, every other college has experienced runners from previous years, and it's exciting to see that. I think you've got some familiar faces coming back.
I think that's a real testament to the kind of increasing difficulty with distance that we're going to see with Div 5. As Ariel, as you mentioned, we do have some iconic faces here and people to shout out. So I'll give a quick mention to Duncan Curry and Pippa and Bruce, who are both extremely ancient and don't ask their ages, but they've been around IB for a bit longer than you might expect. We've also got Emily and B&G, who is running with a busted pinky finger apparently. So it's a good thing that they're not going to be running on their hands. In YKB, not YKB, I apologize. And in Lodge, we've also got Vigo and Vicentia, who are, again, 2 exchange students coming to Australia for the semester, and have been roped in to run this magnificent event. But Jacob, we also have a very big difference with Div 5, and what is that?
Yeah, so we see we've got 11 teams of the 11 colleges here, but we've also got 12 teams from Div X. And so Division X was introduced, I think, in the late 2010s. It's been around for a while now, where basically often past runners or really anyone who wants to sign up can sign up to run either a high drop or a low drop. This is the low drop or the short drop for Div X. And as you can see, we have 12 teams. Now, I think for many people watching, there are lots of familiar faces here. So Hospital Bound is a Bruce team with a couple of people who've run Div X before, actually. The Fast and the Furriest, I think, is a combined Johns and Bruce team. Lawton's Lopers, I know Victoria was on committee last year, actually, and so he's coming back. And then we have a couple of teams from ADFA, a couple of teams from, I think, Trail Boys Junior. I think I recognize those guys as Berg names. At Wits End, I think Gil is from Wright back in the day. So lots of IB experience from across the colleges, and it's really great to see this kind of pushing on and keeping that IB spirit alive in the community. So super excited to see Div X. Basically, Div X will have their own prize within that, so there'll be a first place for this division. With 12 teams, it's going to be very competitive, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they go. So moving on to Div 5 drop site. So Div 5 this year dropped at this four-way intersection here on Bolaro Mountain Road. Now, this is actually very nearby to where Div 6 was dropped all the way back in 2022. However, that time they got to run down the hill to the coast. This time our runners are running up the hill, which I'm sure they're going to have so much fun doing. This has one of the longest scout times, 50 minutes. And so teams are really going to have to be strategic, whether or not they use all that time to get as much information as possible, or whether they choose for a shorter scout, say 20 minutes, to try and figure out where they are still and then get away quickly. I think another thing to note is that while this does appear as a four-way intersection on the map, I'm not convinced how accurate these two trails are. I think these are a bit fainter and might be harder to miss in the dark. But again, teams who take their time at drop site should be able to find them, and that should give them a good clue.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Those trails are always super dodgy, and you never want to make that call straight off the bat, because if you're looking for a full way, that really does limit your options quite a bit. This is a more of an interesting drop site compared to some of the others, because scouts going both ways are going to have some interesting features. So if we start with the west direction, of course you have this really distinct hairpin loop, similar to what we saw for Div 6. Now, in this region, there are lots of hairpins, so scouts are going to have to be really kind of crucial with their bearings in order not to kind of mislead their team and kind of try and get the correct one. They've also got later on this distinctive fork with these two big roads here, which will also make a really big difference, as that's quite a recognizable feature. If we're going east instead, going up north, again, we've got another really distinctive fork near Sugarloaf Hill. Again, forks are quite distinctive on maps, and there aren't many of them. So there should be one of the big clues that gives those eagle-eyed scouts something to go off and hopefully get dropped. But there's one thing I'm noticing here, and I wonder what your thoughts are, Jacob. This is a 50-minute scout, but these two really distinctive forks are only about 2 kilometers away from drop. Do you think they need all that time?
I don't think they need all that time. I think for scouts running west, this is a big hairpin, but you see this has got this little bump in it. And I think that actually will make it harder for scouts to map as opposed to just a strict hairpin. But I don't know whether scouts will go all the way along here. I think if scouts get to this fork, they'll probably pick drop site. I think it'll be quite funny, because I think if they get to this fork, by the time they get back, their scout that's gone north has probably also picked up this fork. And they already know where drop site is, and their team's kind of waiting for them. So I feel a bit sorry for any scout that's going west here, because I think they'll probably scout longer than they necessarily needed to, because I think the scouts that go north and east will get this fork, and that will be the defining clue for a lot of teams. But yeah, I would not be taking 50 minutes for this, especially, I mean, I think in any case, like 20 to 30 minutes is really enough time for scouting. If you don't find enough information in then, like, you're kind of just wasting time. So yeah, I wouldn't take the full 50 minutes. It'll be interesting to see if teams do. But I guess if it helps you get drop site exactly, then why not?
Yeah, I think the difference in picking drop can save you a lot more than just 20 minutes off your scouting time. But then again,
can.
It really is situational, and like you really have no idea going into the drop, so it's hard to call that without hindsight.
Plan to not use your full scout. You also don't want to go out with the expectation of scouting 50 minutes, run for 50 minutes, and get back late, because I think that would be a very
Really
bad way
bad.
to.
I think
that's
also for the.
Sorry, go on.
Well, just wanted to mention, just for the navs as well, this might be quite an easy drop site, given that the scouts return on time. Is that if there are a couple of ifs here, but if they can identify this four-way intersection as navs, and maybe one of the navs runs to this first hairpin, or even though it's not pictured here, Bateman's Bay is actually quite nearby. Maybe they might see the glow of Bateman's to their east. Maybe navs might have a really good shot at kind of locating in a rough area where they are already. So in terms of difficulty, I don't think this drop is too hard, especially given the time. And I think some really tactical divs might be able to get it.
I don't think it is too hard, but runners always find different ways to struggle, shall we say.
Oh yeah,
having been there myself. So yeah, I think it'll be good to watch. But that's enough about drop site. We could talk about it for hours, but let's move on to the route. So now moving on to Div 5, we see, as we saw there, dropped at this four-way intersection on Bolaro Mountain Road. And again, teams can run both ways out of drop site. Neither is particularly bad. We're going to focus on this northern route first. So if teams run north out of drop site to this intersection here on Bolaro Mountain Road, they can then follow that all the way along to Old Bolaro Road, where then they will take this purple route, and as you can see, we're heading back to our old friend, the Corn Trail. So teams can follow back through No Name Mountain Road, and then quite similar to Div 6, follow the Corn Trail up through Monga into Endpoint. Teams can also head, if they head south out of drop site but still want to take the Corn Trail, they can take this green route along Bolaro Mountain Fire Trail, which will also rejoin here with the purple route, and then they can take Corn Trail. There are another couple of options further south, which you can also wind your way through, for example, Hans Road, getting to the Corn Trail, but these are a lot less ideal, and so we've kind of left them off. So that's an option, but I do think that most teams would instead prefer to take the south route, which for Div 5 heads from Bolaro Mountain Road onto Quart Pot Fire Trail. And so Quart Pot Fire Trail is this one, and it's not the nicest of fire trails, and is particularly infamous as there is a section here where there are 10 river crossings within 3 kilometers. And so teams will be definitely getting wet feet going this way. This intersects at Firebreak Fire Trail and Galaraby Fire Trail, where it then heads north to this water drop here, where teams are given the first real route choice. So they can either take this yellow boundary road here and head up to Monga, where they would meet with teams who've taken the Corn Trail up through the picnic area to Monga, or they can take this black route here, heading along Saddleback Road and MacArthur's Road in towards Reedsdale, quite similar to Southern Div 7 teams. And again, both of these then rejoin just north of Reedsdale, as we've seen for all the other divisions. Now, teams that do this would then run along Monga Lane, as we've already seen. However, there is another option for intrepid teams, and we have the Shoebridge track here, which is marked as very overgrown on the maps. This is basically a single track that extends off of Galaraby Fire Trail, and would be a great option for teams to take, as it takes them down into the Arallowan Valley, where then they can follow Arallowan Road all the way up to Endpoint. Part of the problem is the course setters reliably inform me that this is quite an overgrown entrance to the trail here, and so teams may run straight past it, especially in the night, and find themselves at this water drop, having missed the Shoebridge track entirely. But for teams that do manage to take it, it's a very nice option, as then you are just following Arallowan Road and Majors Creek Mountain Road all the way up into Endpoint there. And so that is the route options for Div 5.
Now, in terms of the route analysis, there are definitely some winners and some losers in Div 5, I would say, as compared to Div 7, which is a bit more tighter. Now, I think, where should we start on this one? Maybe the Corn Trail.
Let's start with the Corn Trail, yeah. So any teams head north along the Corn Trail, we've got this blue route and this black route. Of the two, I think the black route is better. It's slightly longer, but it saves about 130 meters of elevation. So it's a little bit flatter on this early section through Old Bolaro Road. And so, as I said as well, I think teams that head south will stay south. I think if you were wanting to hit the Corn Trail, you'd probably head north first. But we may see teams taking through this blue route through here.
Yeah, I think also good to mention is that, you know, I don't know about you, Jacob. I don't really expect to see many teams taking this northern route up Corn Trail, just because we are diverging away from the endpoint. And I feel like this is more a decision teams are going to be forced into if they don't manage to pick drop straight away. But again, with that easy kind of 50-minute drop, I just don't see many teams taking this at all.
I also think the Corn Trail is marked as a single track, which I think might scare teams a little bit. As you know, I know personally I'd much prefer to stay on orange roads that are usually a bit nicer to run on, whereas the Corn Trail will be slower going. However, I think that will also be the case with this Shoebridge track. So if you see the yellow route here, which heads south and takes the Shoebridge track, which, as we said, very overgrown. It's a single track. That there, I think that will scare teams. It is the best route. It's the shortest route and it's the least amount of climbing, but I think it will scare teams. And the course setters have reliably informed me that the entrance to the Shoebridge track is actually very hard to get. And so there may be teams that are planning to take this and just miss it and end up at this water drop.
I can see that very much happening. It's a bit unclear whether or not it'll still be dark by the time that teams do end up at this kind of intersection. And that if we look at this elevation profile, we can really see that, you know, if you manage to get Shoebridge track, this is such a benefit to your team. I mean, by staying in this valley, you're missing so much vert, and only with a short climb at the end, you're kind of missing a lot of the kind of hardship that you get with those green and sign routes. But yeah, the question is really, can you get Shoebridge?
From this intersection here, you are just continuing to climb up to the top of the escarpment. And that's where all that extra vert is coming from. It is a nicer finish. This last 6K of road up here is quite a steep climb, but you do save a lot in this flatter section in the valley here. And so I think, the yellow route there going through Shoebridge is definitely the best route in terms of pure numbers. But I think the green route is probably, it might be too harsh to say. I think it might be the winning route, the green route, because I think it's relatively safe. And kind of intuitive. But I think there's a lot to watch from Div 5. It should be very exciting.
Again, I don't want to put all the eggs in one basket because, I mean, look, even if you miss that yellow route, I think Cyan also has a strong contender to be a good route. I mean, yes, it is a tiny bit longer than green, but the vert is significantly less. You're missing out on a couple hundred there. So, again, that might make the difference for teams who are a little bit slower on that vert. So, again, I really think it could go either way with Div 5 as well. But again, I think far and beyond, getting onto Shoebridge track with that yellow route, I think will save teams so much.
That could be the defining moment. Which one would you take, Alex?
Look, I looking from here, I think yellow definitely. I think I'm always ready for a bit of a more precarious route on the single track. I think it might be a bit more fun. I'm always a big fan of a major road, which is what kind of yellow goes through, because at the end of the day, these roads are paved to be flat for cars, right? So flat for cars, flat for runners.
I would say Arallan Road is not paved. In fact, it is still a dirt road, but it's none of these roads are paved. Only the King's Highway. I think personally, if I was running this, I think I'd end up taking the green route because I think I'd be a little bit scared off by Shoebridge track, to be honest. But I do think it is on paper the best option. It's just whether or not teams can navigate it well enough.
Yeah, I really wouldn't write off any team though. To be honest, I think there's enough kind of leeway to see any of these routes be the winning route for a particular team if they get a good run. So, do get excited.
Is that we should have all the teams really coalescing. I mean, ignoring the Shoebridge track, all the other teams have all these different route options, and they all come together at this point. And so we may end up seeing 4 or 5 teams all coming down together, as well as a couple of teams running here, and we'll get a really good foot race to watch. Fingers crossed.
100%.
Very exciting.
And I think also let's not play off that very generous drop time as well. I think maybe, if a team does decide to cut their losses early and just start running, that might be the difference, because these routes are just, again, so close. So 30 minutes might make a really big difference in position here. So
does that win you the Nav award if you never pick drop and you just went for it?
Look, if you don't tell anyone your strategy, that might do well for the Nav award. But unfortunately, I do feel a bit bad for Div 5, because as we're going to see later on, some of the other divs just have much better opportunities for great Nav. So we will see, but it will definitely win you maybe a first place.
That counts for something, that's for sure. All right, well, let's move on to Div 4.
Let's do it.
Let's not move on to Div.
First of all, Jacob, you feature this year. We've got this brand new invention by IBTV, which is the Corsair Continuum. Now, this is not very accurately named, because it's not decided by the Corsairs, but in fact decided by us. And you would like to say maybe just decided by me. But what are we looking at? I
would view this as definitely more of an Alex Brett than a Jacob invention. But basically, what we're trying to do is just to give a vague idea of how what the main focus of each div is. So is this a navigationally challenging div? Is this like really you need to just be able to navigate through the bush? For those of you who've done Rogaines, a Rogaine would kind of be down this end of the scale. Or is this, as Alex would like to call it, a full-on foot race? So again, if we're thinking like a marathon or a trail race, that's probably up this end of the scale, where it's just about who can run the fastest. Or is it somewhere in the middle, balanced, where route options are key, but also, IB is a race at the end of the day. We've seen in the past where teams don't nav as well, but are just faster, and that can be the difference. So, yeah, this is the Corsair Continuum. And Alex, do you want to explain your reasoning for divs 5, 6, and 7?
I will, and I just want to emphasize before we get into these rankings that, just because a course might be 0 or 9 has no kind of implication on how hard that is actually going to be, or how well that's actually being set by the committee that year. I think the best way to look at this is what kind of teams are favored for that division. So, for example, if you're running something that's getting closer to a 9, those faster teams are probably going to have less issue with bad nav, and they could probably just outrun the bad nav. Whereas in maybe kind of closer to a 3, teams that kind of are less confident on the nav but still fast might be more punished by making some bad decisions. So it's all about kind of framing about who would kind of win and have the best shot. So I think maybe going to the right side of the spectrum first, we've got Div 6. Now, as we saw before, Div 6 really kind of has 2 major choices for nav. So bar that, Div 6 is really a race to a finish. So I think those really strong running teams are going to have a much bigger advantage in Div 6 compared to other divs, just simply because if you get rid of that bush bash, it's mostly straight. And that last kind of fork decision, in my opinion, is pretty obvious. And I think we'll see most teams take that south route down Monger Lane. Jacob?
Yeah, I think out of the 3 we've covered so far, 6 is definitely, it has the least navigation options, I think it's fair to say. However, I do really like the idea of that bush bash in 6, and I really hope there's at least one team that takes it and pulls it off. I'm not convinced we'll see that. I think it may be a bit more of a full-on foot race, but we shall see.
Fingers crossed.
I mean, from the start, if we move on to Div 7 now, you were very adamant from the start that Div 7 is a perfectly balanced div. Why? Do you want to expand on your reasonings for that?
Yeah, well, I think just looking at distance of the race, that first 50% of all the kilometers are really you could go in any of the north routes or any of the south routes. And I think there's a lot of variation in the kind of navigation that you can make in that first half of the race. And as you see, all those routes kind of coalesce onto that one big funnel down the end, where we'll probably see lots of teams overtaking each other as they're kind of just gassing the speed. So I think it's really well broken into that kind of first navigational half and that first kind of that second race half. So in my opinion, it sits near the middle. Jacob, you had other ideas when we were discussing this.
I feel like that navigation is a little bit more important than you maybe give credit for. I agree that all the routes are viable, but I do think that top route, that northern black route, is just so much better than the others that I don't know. But we're not gonna lose too much sleep over this. as again, we just want to make this very clear. This is as decided by us. This isn't to be taken as gospel, but I do agree that it's a very nicely balanced div, and the amount of different route choices that are all very similar is great. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to watching Div 7, I think.
Yeah, especially
and
that cheeky bush bash.
Especially with the cheeky bush bash, you're right. And
Yeah.
Div 5, I think
Div
I
5,
advocate here to be a bit more navigationally challenging, because I think navigation is important. I think the route choice is really important. I think if you pick Shoebridge track and you navigate to it correctly, I don't want to say you'll win the div, because you might not, but like that's definitely a clear advantage over other teams. Whereas I think, it's the rest of the routes are all fairly even, but I do think you can gain a really big navigational, a really big advantage from navigation there for Div 5.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think as we were debating before, it's hard to call what will be the winning route and what is like the best route other than just the one on paper. But I think Div 5 definitely has some wrong routes. So like navigation definitely does matter. I think unless you really love the corn trail, I just think it's going to slow teams down, and most of them are going to have a better experience going south. So I think navigation is important for Div 5.
Yeah. And before we go any further, we would also like to say it is called the course setter continuum. Course setters, if you disagree, please direct all complaints to Alex, not to me.
And my inbox will not be open. So
they're quite big fans of the corn trail, I think. So just be careful.
Yeah.
We can't do too much.
Well, look, it's hard to appreciate the beautiful trail during the night. So look, I'm not sure many teams are going to share that experience, but I don't doubt that there's lots of love in that decision.
All right. Well, shall we head on to Div 4 and we'll see whether the course setter continuum makes a comeback later on.
Let's do it.
And we're up to Division 4 now, usually one of my favourite divs to watch on IB Live. It's good to see we've got a mix of experienced runners and lots of new people. Have we got anything to do about with this div?
I think Division 4, what's commonly known for is kind of the unofficial barrier between the low and the high divs. So often in inward bounds, 7 to 4 get grouped together as low divs, and 3 to 1 get grouped unofficially as the high divs. And Division 4 is no exception to this rule this year. I know, Jacob, you had some very strong opinions about the difficulty of Div 4.
I think this year's Div 4, as we're going to see soon, is hard. And I would almost go to say it's harder than Div 3. So I think if any runners here have signed up for Div 4 going, it'll be a nice, easy hike through the bush, maybe not. But credit to them for signing up. I think they'll all smash it. And I think it's a really great course. So hopefully they look forward to it. All right. Now we're moving on to Div 4. So Div 4 runners will be dropped here at Pistol Shot Road. It's a sandy clearing, and it's near the intersection with Marlbrooks Road here to the south. There are some nearby road signs, including a big one that says Pistol Shot Road, but these are all going to be covered, and so scouts are going to have to rely on their bearings and their road shapes to help pick this drop. In my opinion, I quite like this drop. I think there's lots of good roads around, and I think this three-way bend here and the three-way bend here are both quite distinctive and can really help to pick navs to pick drop. I think that 90-degree bend especially is really helpful and is a really distinctive one if it's well mapped. I also think this is the ground here is actually quite sandy, which is because this is quite low down and close to the coast, and I wonder if teams will pick up on that. I think that's a good hint. They should be looking down close to the coast rather than higher up the mountain range. But I will say all of this comes with a grain of salt and a bit of a biased view, as I actually ran through here in 2022, as did most of the other Div 1 and 2 teams from that year. We were heading up this way, and I think we got a little bit lost around here. So maybe I'm not the best expert on this area, but maybe I like to think that I am.
I think the main difficulty with this drop site is one, that kind of 30-minute scout. And if you kind of look around here, there aren't many kind of distinct man-made features. So if we go to kind of the size and the kind of direction of the routes, we also see that for scouts running north and scouts running south, they're going to have forks in the road. So of course, south, we have this really distinct kind of right angle turn. And looking north, we have this kind of just fork that goes up on this main road and this kind of dashed orange here. So scouts are really going to have to make a decision. Am I going to scout one of these really well, or am I going to scout kind of both routes kind of with less time? And I'm not sure about you, Jacob, but I think really the scouts who are going down both are just going to have more information and probably going to be better off, especially with only 30 minutes.
I completely agree, especially for this south route here. I mean, if you only scout one direction, you've got a nice road there to look at. If you scout both directions for only 5 minutes, you've got that bend and you've got both sides of that bend. And that's a really good feature that should be able to give it away. Whether scouts will do that, we'll see. But I think I would always advocate for scouting a bit in both directions to get a clearer view around drop site rather than just running in one direction, hoping to find a road sign.
100%. But I think for 30 minutes and these bends being really close to the drop point, I think this will be quite an easy drop to get for scouts who are really taking full advantage of this.
I would agree with that. There is one other clue they might be able to use. If you head north, there are mountain bike tracks that cross it. These might be hard to see in the dark, but there is also some like kind of little signage and little taping in the trees that gives an indication of those. I don't know whether or not scouts will pick up on that, but that might just help to kind of confirm that they're around here if they didn't see that mountain bike track marked. This is actually in the middle of quite a big mountain biking area. Thankfully, at 2 a.m. or whenever these guys are dropped, I don't think there'll be too many other mountain bikers out there at the time. But you never know.
Hopefully not.
Maybe give away drop site if a mountain biker rides through yelling where they are. But maybe Div 4 teams can hope for that. But that's
fingers crossed.
Well, fingers not crossed, but maybe they've got their fingers crossed. But yeah, that's drop site. Let's look at the route. All right, we're now moving on to Div 4. And so as we've seen, Div 4 dropped here at this intersection on Pistol Shot Road, just north of Marlbrooks. And again, like with all the other drop sites we've seen, teams can head both ways. So if we look at the southern route first here, they come down Marlbrooks Road and along Heffernan's Road, and then onto Wandera Trig Road. And this is where we get our first little interesting thing of this division. Due to a landslip here on Wandera Trig Road, this has been excluded, and teams are going to have to go over the top of the trig, just adding in some extra vert for a bit of fun. They then get to this intersection with Knowles Road here, where teams, if they choose, can head south, heading down through the Dewar River Valley and Araluen Road, or they can head north along this lime green route here to Gallarabie Mountain, where then they'll take the infamous Gallarabie Fire Trail. Both of these routes will then rejoin later here at the top of Mary Cumbine Fire Trail. So for blue, they head along the valley and then across a private property and up a fire trail right up the mountain here. Or you can head along Gallarabie Fire Trail and you will rejoin at the similar spot. Teams can also head north out of drop site, where they'll head along Firebreak Road and then onto Quart Pot Road again, much like Div 5, where they will follow all the way around, again getting to that same intersection there at Mary Cumbine Fire Trail, which is kind of a nice meeting point for all the Div 4 teams. Now, ones that really love the Corn Trail do have that option. You can head through Hans Road and No Name Mountain Road, but this is definitely a longer option for Div 4. This again would land them at the Corn Trail, and they can follow that into Endpoint as we've seen for the other divs. However, most will probably stay south, heading along Gallarabie Fire Trail, where again we have this option to take the Shoebridge track down into Araluen and following that all the way up to Endpoint. Or teams can again get to this water drop where there's an intersection and the choice of two routes, where the yellow route, again taking that boundary fire trail, or now we have this exclusion zone, unlike in Div 5, where they can't take Macquarie Road and instead have to head around it here. This adds a little bit of more distance and basically means that the two routes become about equivalent. Again, that yellow route will intersect at Monga with any potential Corn Trail route, and then these two routes again will meet at Reedsdale, where we'll get that classic Endpoint approach along Monga Lane into Majors Creek, whereas teams that have taken Shoebridge track will again run all the way up Araluen Road and Majors Creek Mountain Road into Endpoint. And so that's what our routes for Div 4 look like.
Yeah, definitely. I think just first of all, looking from this elevation profile, just looking at where those routes take the teams in Div 4, this division is awful. And I mean awful as in so hilly. So hilly. And I think teams are going to have such a tough time getting through this. It's such a great course, and I think there's lots of trade-offs that you can make in trying to avoid those hills if you think you're unprepared. But every team is going to come out with some kind of injury, or some kind of battle. Yeah, a horror story. Maybe some sore quads.
I mean, if you look at these routes, so the Cyan route here, that's 2,600 meters of climbing in only 65, 66 Ks. The black route here is actually the shortest, coming just under 65 Ks, but it's got 2,600 meters of climbing. Like, that's insane. And if you take this flatter route, this quart pot route, if you take the green one, which is the shortest, you're still doing 2,050 meters of climbing in 65 Ks, and you're getting your feet wet through quart pot fire trail. There are really no kind of easy way outs for Div 4.
No, not at all.
Honestly, I think this is probably the hardest div this year relative to its level. I think a lot of people go, as we said with the teams, Div 4 is kind of that cutoff for the low teams. I think there'll be a lot of people who do not enjoy their Div 4 run a whole lot. This looks hard.
Oh yeah, and I think just finishing this div at all actually will be the real accomplishment. Just forgetting about places for the time being, managing not to DNF, I think is really a challenge. So I think I'd congratulate anyone who really makes it to the end of this. And I think as well, there are some 30% gradients. If we're looking at that kind of that black and green routes, it gets nasty.
This Cyan trail here has sections of descent at kind of 30-40%. So think Cliffs of Doom 2023. And this little climb up here to Merry Cumbine Fire Trail, I mean, you can see it there on the elevation profile. Again, it's 30% for a couple of Ks. Having been down it, I would not recommend, I would not want to go up it. So yeah, the black route might look good. I wouldn't take it. It doesn't sound like a lot of fun.
Yeah, personally, I think the kind of motto for this div is know thyself. Can you and your team really take on these hills? Because otherwise, this orange route, while it is significantly longer and you're going through those major creeks, about 10 of them, at the end of it, I think you might be thanking yourself because you're going to be avoiding a lot of that hardship at those really heavy climbs.
I do think the worry, though, well, not the worry, but maybe in my view at least, I think this Cyan route through Galaraby Fire Trail does actually look like the intuitive route. If you kind of just look at it, not thinking about the elevation, not thinking about it too much, the orange route really looks like you're going out of your way and then coming back. Whereas if you kind of taking this Cyan route, it looks a lot more direct, but it is harder. And so it'll be interesting to see whether strong navs can recognize that and take the orange route. I think in any case, this first half to the top up here is definitely the hard part. And I think it will be really important for teams to pace themselves. I think lots of good power hiking in the first half so that they can run the second half. But I think teams may not do that.
Yeah, 100%. Otherwise, I think my parting words for Steve is just good luck, because you're going to need it.
That's not at all ominous. I think then we have to give extra cheering on to Div 4 on IV Live because, yeah, not an easy div. I hope a fun div. I think it's a great div.
Yeah.
But then again, I'm sitting here not having to run it, so it's easy for me to say. Oh,
yeah. And I think finally, before we end Div 4, maybe just some more hate to Corn Trail. I think there are lots of great routes here, but Corn Trail, I'm sorry, I'm going to be that guy. I'm just going to call it out. I don't think this yellow route that we see on our right is going to be optimal, but rest assured for any Corn Trail fans.
The numbers back you up there. If you take Corn Trail, you're running 73 Ks, which for Div 4 is just, frankly, too much. And that is a bad route option. It is viable. It's not the worst. You're not getting crazily lost, but yeah, we hate the Corn Trail. I think that could be our line here on IVTV.
That's right, but not for long though, because if there are any Corn Trail fans, you are going to get some redemption in the higher divs, as the Corn Trail might be the key to success. So stay tuned for that. But right now, I think we're going to change to Div 3.
We are now looking into Div 3, and I can see in the Yukonbrook team, we've got 3 coaches this year. We've got Jaden, Larson, and Lisa, who are the coaches at YKB. No pressure to Avian this year, running with 3 of his 4 coaches. Good on them.
Well done to Avian. I think otherwise than that, it's, again, a nice mix of first-time runners and returning runners. But I guess looking more broadly across the div, there's lots of experience. We've got a lot of first-time runners, but also a fair few returning runners to hopefully guide their teams along the way. Special shout out to Pat O'Connor at Fenner, who has guided me personally in an ultra before pacing. And yeah, wish him the best of luck. We also have our second lot of DivX teams here. So these guys are now doing the long division. And interestingly enough, I have to apologize. I don't know anything about Boets, but I'm sure they'll do a great job. However, the other 2 teams are the 2 returning teams from last year. So they did the long DivX last year and clearly had such a great time they've come back. Well, in the case of Sexy DivXy, I think they may have DNF'd last year. So I think this is their redemption arc, and I wish them all the best for that. On the other hand, we have Old Fenner, which Caleb and Seb were the winning team last year in DivX long. And they've only really added to their strength by adding Lachlan, who was race director last year, and Jonah, who I can only imagine is also an excellent runner. I've seen some of their training runs, so I think they're definitely a team to watch out for in Div 3. So Div 3 are dropped at this 3-way intersection here between Wallaby Road, Mines Road, and Lions Road. So now we're actually on the north map for the first time, which is exciting. And a 3-way intersection is great because really teams should be able to pick that. It's a great clue for the map. The problem is, on the north side of the map especially, there are a lot of roads. And so there are a lot of, therefore, 3-way intersections. And so teams will have to make sure that they're really careful about narrowing down which one they're actually at. I guess the advantage they do have is that they've got a very long scout time, 61 minutes. Given it's a 3-way intersection, I would be expecting CONAVs to also join the scouting here. So you'd send your 2 scouts in one direction each and your CONAV in a third. And again, I'd be scouting for 20 to 30 minutes. I wouldn't use the full 60 minutes, but teams that do should be able to figure out where they are. But yeah, I think there's lots of different strategies optional that are optional here for teams, and it'll be interesting to see which ones they take.
Yeah, I think it'll be up to personal preference for lots of teams here because if we just kind of have a look at these different routes, there really is just not much to see for quite a while, for a couple of kilometers. And you were mentioning before, so down the Lions Road down south here, the first kind of major road intersection that we have is this fork with Clyde Ridge Road. That is about kind of 3Ks one direction, maybe even a bit more. So, to get there and back 6Ks, you're going to be running at least maybe 40 minutes.
It's a fast.
Other than that, yeah, that's a fast scout. That's a fast scout. And also, if we're not seeing much, we're mostly getting service roads and the very prominent kind of ridge line, no matter which way you go as a scout. My personal mindset is if I've got 60 minutes, the race directors are kind of telling me, oh, there's something really obvious and really prominent, but you're going to have to run a while to get to it. And so it'd be interesting to see which kind of teams are, trust themselves and say,
just keep it there. They're throwing a number out there, but yes.
Oh yeah, it could be a load of crap as well. So do you want to trust what's going on there?
I do think for both Lions Road and Wallaby Road, and I guess even Mines Road, there are a few distinctive hairpins. I mean, the one there at Lions Road really sticks out to me near the intersection with Brushwood Road. That might help give extra clues. Obviously, all the little fire management trails coming off as well should help to maybe confirm. Like they can come back and say, well, we know we're at a 3-way intersection. We've got half a dozen 3-way intersections. Oh, we've got a few where we've got this sorts of roads patterns. I don't think there'll be many teams that will leave drop with absolute certainty of we're definitely here and there's no way, because I think there's no kind of really gimme clues. But I do think there'll be a lot of teams that should be able to go, we're 95% sure we're here. And then after a few Ks of running, when they then keep matching up those features, be like, yes, we're definitely there. We're on the right track. I think it's not an easy drop site. It's probably not the hardest of drop sites, but definitely one that teams are going to need to really think about and use the clues they've got. I think, yeah, good teams that are confident with picking their drop site and using all those clues will do really well here and can gain a good advantage. So if we look at Div 3 here, we've got our drop site at that three-way intersection, and there are really two options heading out of drop. Teams can either head west along Wallaby Road or south along Lyons Road. If you head east along Lyons Road, you really have to do a big detour, which is just not worth taking. And so really only 2 out of the 3 options are viable. If you head along Wallaby Road, you head down then through Pig Road and Western Distributor Road into Currowan Camp towards highway crossing number 1. However, if you take Lyons Road, you hit Clyde Ridge Road and again can make your way down towards Currowan Camp. Or you also have an option to turn off down here, down Peachtree Gully Road. So there are 3 different options to get to the different highway crossings. So that top highway crossing 1 there is heading through Currowan Camp. If you instead take Peachtree Gully Road, you can either continue heading east along McCarty's Creek Road to highway crossing number 3, or you can cut in to highway crossing number 2 here. Now, highway crossing number 2 does have a water drop, which might be of advantage, but it's probably not the ideal choice, as we'll see. I guess the only other thing to mention before we cross Kings Highway is that if teams take this black route through Currowan Camp, there is the option for a very small bush bash here to cut off this turn. I think it's about a 200-meter bush bash to cut off about 2 kilometers. However, you do have to cross a creek at the bottom of it, and so that might turn some teams off of it. Now, if we zoom into the highway crossings in more detail, we see that highway crossing 1 here is a straight highway crossing. You get to the highway along Western Distributor Road, and you can cross it straight away. Now, this is quite nice because then if we look at highway crossing 2, it's not drawn on here, but in fact, teams actually have to come down to the highway crossing and then bush bash up this spur to hit Downhill Fire Trail. So they can't take this excluded road. They actually have to bush bash along the spur here to get there. And so that's a 500-meter bush bash that's being added in at the highway crossing. And so this maybe is not as nice for teams to take. It's a similar story with highway crossing 3. Again, there's no nice road that kind of meets at the Kings Highway. And so teams have to come down to this gate and then follow one of the creeks along here. So this is a private property which is being used. They have to follow a creek along the private property all the way to Nelligen Creek, where then they can cross underneath the highway and get to the road on the other side. And so again, there is a bit of a sneaky bush bash in here that teams may struggle with or may slow them down and may make that highway crossing 1 is actually the best option. But if we then assume that all teams have crossed the highway, again, we have a few different options. If they cross down south, they take Old Bolaro Road all the way up towards No Name Mountain Road and again heading to that corn trail. If they cross at highway crossing 2, they take Spring Creek Fire Trail, which is deceptively long as it winds its way around and is quite hilly, getting then to Winter's Fire Trail and Eric's Fire Trail, again heading then down towards the corn trail. The third option is if they head north, and you saw there they kind of come down to Downfall Fire Trail, and then they have this little section here where it's marked with intermittent flagging tapes. So initially this was planned to be a bush bash, where teams would bush bash down the spur to Spring Creek Fire Trail. When vetting the course setters actually found that there's a little footpad here and that people have hung tapes in the tree. And so you can kind of follow that down to the fire trail. And so it is a bush bash, but it's maybe a little bit more signposted than your average bush bash. But that is the option if you're heading from highway crossing 1, because otherwise you have to go all the way through Downfall Fire Trail and back around Spring Creek Fire Trail, adding a lot of distance. From there, again, if you're on this northern route, we have this option that we saw with Div 6, where we can do a bush bash across the corn trail and cut out all this running distance. For that, you head along Winter's Fire Trail and Cabbage Tree Fire Trail, and then you lock yourself into this bush bash. But as we've said with Div 6, this is not the easiest of bush bashes, and if teams want to avoid that, they can instead head south again down to the corn trail. Now, the back half of Div 3 is very similar to Div 6. Teams will run along the corn trail, come into that picnic area and the water drop there, and then head along Monga Lane. Like Div 6, they can also head north as well, but we expect most teams to take the preferred route, heading through Monga Lane and then into Endpoint. And so that's our routes for Div 3.
So as we just highlighted, there are a couple of really prominent bush bashes in this div, which is really exciting in terms of nav choice. So if we'll just go over them again with this kind of bigger picture, this first one we can see starts on the sign route here, and this one's more intuitive with this hairpin, so teams will be able to kind of leap across and cut some of the running around. But that's more of a in a small gain, but I think what's really most important here is this kind of tunnel or this kind of route here. And so there's no kind of official name for this bush bash, but you were saying it was flagged down, Jacob. Oh, should I mention that?
So it's a bush bash where I think the course setters wanted to treat it as a normal bush bash. They went there, vetted it, and found that someone had put some tape in the trees, and there's a little footpath, or a footpad as it's called. And so they've kind of marked that on the maps to be nice. According to them, it's actually better if you don't follow the tape. It can be an easier bush bash, but in any case, it's not the worst of bush bashes. And it's really necessary because otherwise, you're taking this whole thing where you're heading all the way, around here. If you're taking through highway checkpoint 1, you then have to go all the way around if you don't take that bush bash. And so that really is the only viable option if you're wanting to come through highway crossing 1. Now, we spoke a bit about the highway crossings in the route, but I think that highway crossing 1 for Div 3 is definitely the best choice because there's no bush bash with it, whereas the other two, here we have to bush bash onto a trail, and here we follow a creek, and then which is kind of a bush bash as well, and they are a bit further out of the way. Whereas I think navs that feel confident enough traveling through the bush and can follow this flagged path will take this option, and that's by far the best option. No matter whether or not you then choose to bush bash onto the corn trail or just run around the corn trail, I think teams that choose highway crossing 1 will do the best in Div 3.
So I guess setting yourself up early for success and being on the right path to be able to take those good bush bashes is the key of the game here for Div 3.
Exactly. So when leaving drop, I mean, they can head Wallaby Road onto Pig Road and Western Distributor, or they can follow Lions Road down through Currowan Camp. It's really a much of a muchness. If you take this bush bash through Currowan Camp, that is slightly shorter, but not by a lot. And I think either route is really fine. Personally, I'm not sure I would take this bush bash, but I also think for teams that are wanting to take the Corn Trail bush bash or thinking about that, this is definitely a good opportunity to just test what the bush is like. It's only a couple of 100 meters of bush bash. Test, does it feel like we can move through this confidently, safely, etc. Or if you kind of do that and go, that 200 meters was hell, I really don't want to do more, well then maybe don't take the Corn Trail later on when you're more tired. I think it's a big thing.
And I guess on that case of preserving energy, I think that's a common theme of this route as well, because if we kind of look at the end of this route, you might feel like it's kind of familiar, right? Because we see right here that Div 6 is literally dropped kind of midway through this Div 3 route. So the end of Div 3 is actually the start of Div 6. So this Corn Trail Bush Bash that you're mentioning, Jacob, is the exact same one that's available to Div 6 runners. This actually saves, I think, so much time, as we talked about in the Div 6 analysis. You're saving about maybe kind of, let's say generously 10Ks here. That is a lot of time on feet that you're saving to maybe kind of run out this last kind of very funneled section at the end for Div 3. So I don't know. That to me that makes a really big difference.
It is. I mean, according to our graph, it's saving almost 13 Ks and about 350 meters of climbing, which is a lot. But I do think that if teams have tried to bush bash already, either through the section near Currowan Camp or at Downfall Fire Trail with the flag tape, and have gone, wow, this sucks, we've got a bit lost, or this took us a lot longer than expected, I think they'll be scared off by the Corn Trail. And I think that's the right decision to make. Because I think if you're not as confident in the bush, don't bush bash. Even if it is saving 13 kilometers, that's great if you successfully do it. If you spend 4 hours wandering in circles in the middle of the bush out there near the Corn Trail, then may as well have just taken that extra 13 kilometers. So I do hope there are some teams that take this, mostly because I think the more teams that take this, the more chance there is of some interesting interesting bush bash choices. I think, like we highlighted in Div 6 as well, this is really the only place to bush bash at the Corn Trail. If you bush bash any further up from Misty Mountain Road, you're really getting a much larger bush bash. If you bush bash any further like south, it's just not saving you as much. Like, this is the ideal point where you can save as much as possible. And it's also quite nice in the sense that there's a nice little saddle in the middle of that bush bash where you can kind of make your way down to the saddle and go back up. You don't descend all the way down to the creek. So it's a better option.
Yeah.
I mean, we've focused mostly on bush bashing, but I guess there are also those red and orange routes. They are fine. If you don't want to, if you're not confident in the bush and don't want to take the downfall flag tape section, red and orange are about the same. Orange is slightly shorter but slightly more hilly. But for teams that are really just wanting to stick on roads and run, that is definitely an option. But not as an ideal. Definitely won't win you an award, but still, to each team their own, I think.
Exactly. I think another thing that won't win you that NAV award is that kind of pitfall that you might fall in with drop site if you kind of just go off blindly. We kind of mentioned it at the start, but Mines Road here, as you can see, kind of coming northeast from the drop site, that is just completely the wrong direction. I think with this three-way, there's kind of a couple of ways you can go. This is probably the only bad way to go. So it'll be interesting. Some teams might veer off that way.
It is the only bad way to go. With Endpoint situated, though, on the very western side of the map, I can't imagine teams running east and therefore away from Endpoint if they're not sure where they are. That would be bad strategy. But, we've seen weirder things in the past, so I think any team, though, that does run up Mines...
Yeah, Murphy's Law?
Exactly. Any team, though, that does run up Mines Road, I think will not be ending their race, but definitely be ending their chance of winning, because it will be about 6K till they figure out where they are, and then you've got another 6K, so you're already adding 10 minimum, probably closer to 15 extra kilometres to the rest of the division. And yeah, good luck catching that up. Not even Griffin Div 1, I think, could do that. So yeah, I think that's the biggest.
That's a testament.
Yeah. I think that's about it for Div 3. I think this is a very interesting div, and I also think you'll see a lot of the similar themes crop up again in Div 1 and in Div 2. So I think it's a good one to spend a bit of time on. And yeah, I think it should be a really exciting div to watch, especially with the amount of bush bashing opportunities, and therefore the potential for different routes that creates, even though there are only really a few viable roads to follow. Once you add in the different bush bashing opportunities, you can get all sorts of stuff. So should be exciting.
Definitely. So I guess let's go into the Div 2 teams now, but keep this kind of map in mind because we're going to come up to a bunch of the same themes as we go to our Div 2 analysis. So see you there.
We can see we're getting up to the high divs now because there's less colleges entering into the Division 2 team. We've seen a couple colleges come out, but now we've got Nick Boffer in from B&G, who's also racing with a broken finger. Don't really know what they're doing there in B&G to have two people with broken fingers. But
I reckon that's a B&G secret strategy. I reckon they're breaking fingers to help them hold the compasses better or something. It sounds like it's the sort of thing.
You wouldn't know unless they release the Strava maps.
Kidding. We wish them all a speedy recovery. And as Alex said earlier, it's a good thing you're not running on your hands. So.
Mm-hmm.
We also have a fun fact down in Griffin Div 2. Lachlan actually ran IB previously, but is no longer based in Canberra. And so apparently he's going to be flying into Canberra just to be running IB this year. So extremely impressive. That's one more similarity with Kipchoge in the Sydney Marathon.
I think that's into an elite runner then. If he's flying in just for this race, then that's
I think
that's
technically that qualifies. Yeah. Unfortunately for him, though, he might be off more than he can chew because he's going to be running with Nick Brendan this year, and fantastic nav and runner. But sometimes, just can go a little bit off script. So it'd be interesting to see how Griffin goes.
Yeah, in Bruce, we also have Gracie, who is, I think at this point, an IB legend. I think that's fair to say. And she's the only female head nav for Div 2. And I think that's an incredible achievement. And I think she'll absolutely smash it. So hopefully she just doesn't take any ill-informed bush bashers. But there may be options this year. Have to wait and see for the route reveal. But before we get onto the routes for Div 2, this show doesn't pay for itself. Thankfully, we've got the sponsorship coordinator with us. And so to tell us about all those amazing sponsors for IB this year, Alex.
Yeah, that's right. It wouldn't be IB without plugging in the sponsors at least once. And the bib for 2025 is more crowded than ever. So we've picked up a couple of new sponsors this year, as long as a couple of our long-time supporters who we've been very thankful for all their support and helping IB run how it does today. So, of course, a really big shout out to Fortis Physiotherapy, one of our biggest partners with IB, who do so much with informing our community, having better strength and con practices, and, of course, giving us the IB discount. So, very conveniently located in the Di Riddell Centre in Canberra. Of course, also Paddy Palin and Catherine Du in Intersport. Fantastic for giving us discounts using the IB discount to get some gear throughout the year. IB is very, very intensive when it comes to the required gear lists. So anything to reduce that burden is much appreciated. Of course, Tarkeen will be providing the prizes for some of the divisions this year. And of course, One Sport will be providing the tops and have been giving some of our colleges really generous discounts. And you'll be seeing that hopefully already with Send-Off. And if you attend Endpoint this year, then you may catch a glimpse of Tailwind Out Nutrition, a new sponsor for this year, with their recovery mix. And so it might be a good opportunity to try some of their drink mixes, which are absolutely excellent.
All right, well, Alex, thanks for giving us that rundown on the sponsors, and thank you to all of the sponsors for their support of this incredible event. But without further ado, let's move on to Div 2.
Now coming to Div 2 here, let's just have a look at this drop site. So with 24 minutes, it's significantly faster than the 61 minutes that was given for Div 3. And they're going to be dropped here on Backhouse Road. So just kind of looking initially, this kind of does seem like a boring road. It's kind of a north-south, bit diagonal, just with a few kind of trails coming off this here. But otherwise not much detail. If we're going up north, we'll see it kind of curves and bends a bit, but I feel like teams are not really going to get much from this drop site. Of course, we're here down the Clyde River, but with only 24 minutes, it might be a bit hard. Down south, Jacob, what are your thoughts here?
I think scouts that head north aren't going to get much except for those bends. However, scouts that head south are the key here. So to get down to the River Road, which is, as you can see, this kind of intersection here, there are a few houses. There'll be a big sign there. This is 4Ks plus or minus 150 meters around trip. It's a fast scout, but I think for Div 2, it's definitely doable, especially given teams will be heading off downhill, and then they might be able to see those lights. So I think this is definitely one that scouts should push for, because once you get that intersection, you'll be able to figure out where you are. I think teams that don't get that intersection might still be able to see the Clyde and see some lights and have a fair idea of where they are. It is also these bends are quite distinctive, but I do think this is one of the harder drops. The course setters also tell me that it's only made harder by the fact that there are a whole lot of logging roads in the area. So kind of little trails have been made by logging that don't necessarily show up on the map or aren't very accurate. And this may confuse runners even more, which, we love. So I think it looks like
That's always what you want.
Exactly. It looks like quite a plain road, and it is, I guess, a little bit of a plain road. It's not a three-way intersection like we saw at Div 3, but I think there is definitely one big clue here, being down here at the River Road. And if not, I think teams, might struggle a little bit. But again, this is Div 2. Hopefully there's enough experience in there as well that teams can have an idea of where they're going. I think the other interesting thing is that the best routes all involve running south and therefore east, away from drop site. And so I think that will be interesting to see as well. If teams don't pick it, they'll probably head north, which isn't the worst route, as you can kind of come back around anyway. But it's a nice one to get for sure. So I think
100%. Great. Well, let's have a look at the routes.
Let's have a look at some routes. Sounds good. So now looking at the route for Div 2, we see our drop site here on Backhouse Road. And teams can kind of head two different directions from that. So either they can head east and south, down Backhouse Road, down to the River Road, which is a lot flatter as it skirts the Clyde River. rather than heading further up the escarpment. And that's the other option for teams. They can head north from drop site and then take this smaller access trail towards Drury's Road and Clyde River Road, and then come down through this exclusion zone, which thankfully they're not a part of, and head back down towards Lyons Road and Carrowan Camp. And so we can see that here where either teams take the River Road all the way down, or they stay very high on Clyde Ridge Road, and they don't really go through this middle section. We've got the exclusion zone there, and this middle section, there are lots of trails, but they all kind of wind their way through and are not as direct. So we really expect teams to take one of these two routes. If they are heading south, they can also take this yellow route here, which will allow them to take Highway Crossing 2 if they want to. If they, for example, really need some water, they can head that way. But I think this is a less than ideal route, and so teams would not take this. As we discussed with Div 3, there is advantage in potentially taking Highway Crossing 1 as it doesn't have a bush bash. But again, we see teams that do take that do have the option to bush bash anyway just before it near Carrowan Camp. Teams that head south will instead come down through Highway Crossing 3 along the River Road and along Old Ballaro Road like we saw for Div 3. Again, the back half of this is quite similar to Div 3. So we have the three different options where you take Old Ballaro Road, you take Spring Creek Fire Trail, or you take this intermittent flagging tapes Downfall Fire Trail bush bash. And again, teams also have the option, if they so choose, to bush bash onto the Corn Trail. Again, teams that don't want to do that will just follow Eric's Fire Trail down to Corn Trail and run it like as if they were in Div 3 or in Div 6, as we've already seen. And then it's quite a similar approach to Endpoint all the way. And so as we can see, Div 2 is quite similar to Div 3, especially in the second half. But that is our Div 2 route.
So moving to the route analysis for Div 2 here, we can see that we're quite similar to Div 3, but we've kind of moved further east and a bit lower down the escarpment. And what this does is it really opens up this kind of route down here that we're seeing with yellow going through the number 3 highway intersection. And so looking at this elevation profile and the grade, I would say above and beyond, Jacob, that this kind of yellow route is definitely your safest, most viable route if you just want to run on these open trails.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's saving 400 meters of climbing compared to the blue route, the cyan route, and is another 300 meters less than the orange route, and the orange route is longer. So that's definitely the best option. And I think the main reason for that is it really just follows that river. And if you're following a river, you're not going to be going up and down hills too much. And so it follows that river for so long. And then also when it crosses the highway, that section on Old Ballaro Road is also quite flat before it gets up to intersecting with the orange and the cyan route. I mean, the one downside of Highway Crossing 3 is that, as we saw with Div 3, there's a bush bash there. You have to follow along the creek in order to actually get there. So you enter private property and then you walk along a creek and then cross under the highway at a creek. So you will get wet feet. It's maybe not the most fun, but it's a better route. And the other thing with this is for Highway Crossing 2, you also have to bush bash anyway to get to the trail. So it's not like that's necessarily a better option if you're worried about that. The one thing that I would say is that the top route, that cyan route, sorry, not the cyan route. Yeah, the cyan for the first half, and then it follows that darker blue route. That's only worth taking if you're going to bush bash. Because if you don't do that Corn Trail bush bash, you're just adding so much elevation by heading back up the escarpment and around. Yes, Highway Crossing 1 is nicer because there's no bush bash involved, but you've already locked yourself into 2 or 3 other bush bashes by doing it. I really don't think that. I think that the only way you should take anything except for the River Road, really, and that yellow route, is if you're planning to bush bash. We may see teams do that. I'm sure we will see teams do that and take other routes. I guess the other problem there is there's that exclusion zone there from Div 1 to 2, that little trapezium there. So you could also look at, is it worth taking the cyan route to where it kind of bends? Sorry, I can show you that. This cyan route here to where it bends and then kind of following down to the orange route, again, you're still getting all that climbing in going back up the escarpment. And so, I mean, this is just, if you want to run, this is the best route. If you really don't want to run, I mean, you can save 15 Ks by bush bashing, but you have to bush bash. And I think they're the two biggest, kind of the most extreme parallels of this route. I mean, it's easy to say that here when we've got the maps, as opposed to when you're there at drop site. But yeah, which one would you take?
Yeah, that's a lot of forward planning.
Yeah, it is.
Like honestly, and I think especially for these longer divs, like you kind of just want to take them segments at a time. I don't think anyone wants to plan this kind of ridiculously really detailed route from drop site. They just want to start running, especially with that 20-minute scout time. So it's even possible that these bush bashes aren't even being thought of when they're leaving drop site.
No, definitely.
So and then
I think teams that do take the bush bash,
and then on paper there, I think just follow
kind
the
of
river,
see
right?
it, that see it 30, 40 Ks in, and then go, oh, actually, we could bush bash there. I think it's much more likely, that teams will just start running. I think the yellow route is a bit counterintuitive. It does look like, I mean, you're heading away from endpoint and you kind of really go long, but I do think this is, the best route. It's the one I would take if I had all this data available to me. If I was sitting there at drop site, I'm not sure it is the one I'd take, but that's the advantage we get as commentators.
Yeah, exactly. The other part is, if your scouts maybe aren't up to scratch, Jacob, you might not even think of running south initially from drop site either. So, we were saying before, you're being dropped definitely east of drop site. Like everyone's going to know that. So it feels like it'd make more sense to start going on this sign route. And so I can definitely see some teams taking this less efficient route.
Sorry, or maybe heading all the way to the intersection here at Mogood and then coming back down. But yes.
And then, and then they might see this bush bash, think, oh, we've gone the wrong way, or we haven't gone the perfect way. This might be possible. Let's try this. And then that's how they kind of find themselves bush bashing an hour onto the contrail and maybe saving a lot of time. So
maybe.
I think that's probably the two mindsets you might come out of this, but who knows, maybe something in between.
I also think that there are a lot of other little routes through here that teams might take, where they come through here and then cut across to that one or cut down here, that just, we haven't mapped them because they're not ideal, but teams may still take them on the day, and they're not particularly worse. They're just not quite ideal, or the main route choices. But I think they're still an option, and I think we may well see teams taking them. Well, that about sums it up for Div 2 then, unless you've got anything to add, Alex.
Yeah, not really. I think most of the changes we see is in this first half, and of course this second half of Div 2 is looking very familiar by now. It's about the same that we're getting from Div 3 and Div 6, so I think the same principles still apply. So it will be interesting to see who can kind of beat that foot race. But otherwise, I think, Jacob, let's move on to Div 1.
Sounds good.
Okay, and last but not least, we have Div 1, and I would personally like to give a shout out to 4 female identifying head navs within this div. That is a great achievement because our first one was in 2022. So I'd like to give a shout out to Jazz from Bruce, Leah from Berg, Gabby from Johns, and Liv from Wright. It's a really great achievement, girls, and I'm personally so proud of you, and I can't wait to see how Div 1 pans out this year.
I think it's a really great testament to the evolution of IB over the years and all the effort that the colleges put into encourage female identifying participation. It takes a lot of effort, and I think everyone's doing a great job. So within the colleges specifically, we also have a couple shout outs. Kiara at Wham Bam Div 1, I'd like to give a big shout out, who's been doing Div 7 for a couple of years, and this is their first foray, not only in the high div, but the Div 1 especially. I think that's a huge achievement. As well, we have Oscar Baum and his team returning. Oscar did Div 1 last year for Fenner and unfortunately did not make it to the end. So this will be a real redemption run for him. And of course, backed by an extremely strong Fender team with me, Amber and Jono. So be keen to look out for how they do. Best of luck. I'd also like to shout out the Aussies team with their decision to run 3 first-time runners in Div 1, which is definitely a bold choice. So best of luck to them and see how that goes. Jacob, any mentions?
I think that is indeed a bold choice, both in our bolding of their names and their decision. But I think it's not done without good reason. I'm sure they'll smash it. I think across the other divs, though, we do have a lot of returning runners, a lot of familiar names who've run divs 1 to 3 last year and also in previous years. But I do think a special shout out to Griffin does need to go with 4 returning runners, all of whom I think are big names, big runners. I stalked their Strava. The minimum distance, what they've done is 3,000 kilometers for one of the runners. So I think they're definitely the team to beat. Rumor has it they're going for a sub 12-hour record, but on this year's course, not sure it's quite doable, as we'll soon see. So yeah, but best of luck to them. All right, last but not least, we come to Div 1. Now, Div 1 are dropped on a little clearing on Barkshed Road, which, coincidentally or not, you can decide, is right near the aptly named Ryan's Creek and Ryan's Fire Trail. I hear Ryan was very happy to be out there vetting these creeks and fire trails as one of the course setters. But yeah, they're dropped on this little bend in Barkshed Road next to this clearing. And as we can kind of see, again, the big clue is going to be for scouts heading west, whether or not they hit the river road. So this is the river road that we saw in Div 2. Again, lots of properties around. It's 2.9 Ks there, pretty flat, and 2.9 Ks back. It's a hard scout, but this is Div 1. I think if teams use their full 40 minutes, there are teams that will get to that intersection. And if you get to that intersection, you will pick drop. You'll know where you are. They also had this nice kind of straight section of road to get there. But yeah, I think it's not out of the realms of possibility that a couple of divs at least will get to that intersection and then be able to come back and tell their teams they know exactly where they are.
I don't know. I think that is interesting. Like 2.9 Ks doesn't seem like a lot, but I think the traditional scout, especially if someone who's unprepared and doesn't know what they're looking for, is going a bit slower than their parkrun pace. And I'm just a bit skeptical that scouts are really going to make it all 3Ks in 20 minutes, give or take, to that gate. Like that just seems like a bit of a distance to me, and I feel like this might be easily missed.
That's fair. I'm still gonna reckon that there'll be at least one that gets there, but we can agree to disagree. That's okay. What about scouts heading in the other direction?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's a bit less generous than that gate and that river road that we see from the west. So on the east side here, we're really just going to see a couple more unmarked fire trails, unmarked intersections, I should say, and kind of just heading down this southerly direction. Look, you might be able to get it based off the road shape, but there's really nothing really distinct going on here. There is a kind of intersection with a highway about 4 Ks away, but no one's going to be making that. That's not even picture on this.
Yeah, old
right?
Princess Highway is somewhere out east out here, but I don't think if teams are maybe not getting to this gate, I'm not sure they're going to get all the way to Old Princess Highway. Or if they do, they're going to come back and face a 75%.
Definitely not.
But that's a different story.
But you know what? Maybe for Div 1, that might be worth it. But
the other interesting thing
depends on your thoughts on the rules.
We can leave that for Griffin to decide. I think the other interesting thing is, like Div 2, this is also in logging, in an active logging area, and so there are probably going to be other trails that aren't marked on the map that might confuse scouts a bit. I guess the only other thing, and this is coming from the course setters, is if you look really closely, you can see a nice little patch of kind of white in there amongst the green. This is apparently the exact clearing where they're dropped, and the course setters reckon that keen-eyed navs will be able to spot this clearing and pinpoint their location. I'm unconvinced, but we'll see. Maybe there will be a keen-eyed nav or two out there.
Well, it's unfortunate they're not going to have a big red arrow to point them to that clearing. So, look, I think that's going to be lost on most people, to be honest. I think it might be a bit more up to luck. But, yeah, hopefully, look, if they have some fast scouts, if they kind of recognize this U-shaped bend that kind of comes around in the road, maybe we'll get a couple that get this, especially with a 40-minute scout. And I think it's really important for Div 1 to get this drop site, in particular because of this really prominent south route that we're going to talk about with the route analysis.
So let's just move on to the overall picture here and have a look at what the route looks like.
Div 1, we can see here that again, drop site is at that clearing there on Barkshed Road. And if we assume that teams pick drop, they're going to head west. Now they have this decision point here less than or about a kilometre into their run, where they can either keep heading west along Barkshed Road towards Shallow Crossing, and I think we have a little video to share about Shallow Crossing. This is a knee-high river crossing that really is just quite a wade, and I think any team that reaches this will enjoy that. So if we want to play that clip now.
Are you filming?
I'm filming. I think it'll be, yeah.
We're documenting it there. I'm really glad I dubbed him in. It looks foul. It's so cold though.
Yeah, you can see he's shaking.
Oh, what if it gets deeper in the middle?
No, you can do it. It's literally an ice bath. It is so cold.
Excellent.
Well, as you can see, that is definitely one option, taking Shallow Crossing. However, I don't think I would like that 4 kilometres into a run. And so teams can head that way, but they can also instead head south down here. And we'll look at that route later. That's quite different compared to what we've seen so far. So if teams do take the Shallow Crossing route, they then have the option of basically they've got a few exclusion zones that they need to wind their way around. So they can either continue heading west along Drury's Road, and then they either take Mines Road or Mines Road South, because the Clyde Ridge Road here is excluded, but they can rejoin that later on. Otherwise, teams can take the River Road, this purple route here, and again, that exclusion zone there prevents them from just running it all the way down, and they can take Old Mines Road, Currowan Road, or even go back onto the River Road, and we get some ones that look similar again to parts of Div 2 and Div 3 in this southern section here, or this southern section of the northern section, just before they cross at Kings Highway. Again, we have a small bush bash option near Currowan Camp. If teams stay high on Mines Road, it's quite similar to Div 3, taking Wallaby Road through there. And basically all 3 highway crossings are in play. Of these then, all these teams would then want to follow the Corn Trail. So purple, again, we come down here to the Corn Trail. Yellow and black, again, following Eric's Fire Trail. There is also that bush bash option where teams can bush bash here through to the Corn Trail, as we've seen already in Div 6 and Div 2 and 3. And then teams from that would head further along to Monga. Now, if we consider the south route, they also have a river crossing quite early at Cockway Creek. However, this is much nicer than what you saw already for Shallow Crossing. And so this is definitely, you will get less wet feet, but still you will have wet feet. And teams here will head south, cross the creek, and then just keep heading south down through towards Neligan. Now, there is one kind of key route option choice here where teams can either, at Tomboy Hill, they can either stay on the fire trails around Lookout Road and Perry's Lane, or they can take Tomboy Road down and either take this fire trail or this mountain bike track here, although that is a little bit less well marked and would be slower going, and then follow the power lines here. So there's no actual trail under these power lines, but it's often quite open under power lines, and they can follow that down and then take that all the way down here towards Old Neligan Road. Teams will then follow Old Neligan Road across the highway crossing at Neligan, basically a reversal of 2022, then taking Runniford Road and ending up near where Div 5 is dropped. Teams that take this option will then, much like Div 5, continue heading south, taking Quart Pot Fire Trail, and then again having that option of either taking the Shoebridge track and then through Arallowan into Majors Creek, or heading back up the escarpment, although I think this is less ideal, heading through Reedsdale, and then again rejoining with any teams that have taken the Corn Trail all the way through to that familiar endpoint approach. And so, as we can see, there are lots of different options for Div 1, and it should be a really exciting division. So, as you can see with Div 1, we have a lot of different options for the routes. I would say Div 1 is kind of a highlight reel of the course. Like you've got all the different trails, all the different ones are vaguely viable. Now, if teams decide to take shallow crossing, which they may because it kind of looks like a bridge over the river. It's not a bridge as we just saw, but they don't know that until they get there. If they choose to take that, then basically it's quite similar to Div 2, except we've got 3 exclusion zones that the runners basically have to pick their way around. Now they can kind of wind their way through and then take the river road, that flatter option, and come down through highway crossing 2 or 3, or they can head up the escarpment and then come down through highway crossing 1. Out of all of these, probably that maroon route there is the best. You do get a bit more climbing because you go up the escarpment, but then you dodge all the exclusion zones, and so it's actually a little bit shorter. And again, as we've spoken about already, highway crossing 1 is the nicest because you don't have to bush bash. If teams don't do that and head along the river road because it's flatter, then of those, highway crossing 3 is definitely the better option, because highway crossing 2, you just get all these hills heading back up. You're just adding more vert, even though you saved it. So I would say either maroon or cyan are the 2 main options. But it really is much of a muchness. Like we're talking a few kilometers here or there, maybe 100, 200 meters of elevation gain, which is important, but also over 100 Ks or nearly 100 Ks may not make or break your IB. Again, like Div 2, we have that full bush bash option. So teams can actually run as, I think it's under 75 kilometers. They take this maroon route fully, where they then bush bash here at Currowan Camp, bush bash again, taking that flagged route section, and then do the Corn Trail bush bash, and then finish as Div 6 has. It would be ambitious, but I think, if you're going to go in for one bush bash, why not go in for all 3? I think it's definitely a winning route. Whether teams will take it and have the thought to do, I want to do 3 bush bashes as well as still running 75k with 3,000 meters of elevation gain. Like it's not an easy route, but it's definitely the shortest. Whether it's the shortest time wise, we shall see. But that's kind of the northern section of the routes. What about the southern ones?
Yeah, so if you decide you want to avoid all that mess and you want to go south instead, then I can definitely sympathize with you. So that southern route that we saw kind of cuts off quite early from drop site. So it does depend on teams knowing where they are sort of going on drop site, because of course that intuitive route, if you have a look at drop site, is just going kind of dead west until you get to where Bats Endpoint is. That's a good way of estimating. But so we'll see with the southern route here, we're going to be following this dark blue line and this orange line here. And this is a bit nicer. It's a bit flatter. And you'll see where this kind of black line is here. So with the blue route, there is the kind of hard to see bush bash there that goes across some power lines. So if you wanted to bush bash, you'd be taking that black route. But I think it's quite an obvious one that most teams will see. And we'll just kind of follow the route with dark blue. And we're going into Nullagin here, Nullagin Lagoon, one of my favorite camping spots. This is a reversal of the 2022 route. So they saw them coming into Maloney's Beach and into the Bateman's Bay area, heading towards the coast. This time, Div 1's going to be heading away from the coast. So they'll be doing that crossing, and this highway crossing 4 is the only Div where this is possible, I'm pretty sure. So
I think more for other divs, but they have to run a long way in the wrong direction.
It's the only one where you don't look like an idiot. Again, Div 7 probably could run all the way out here if they really felt like it, but then they'll probably be picked up by the race directors. And after you take Nullagin, you're going to be just coming down on this road here. And I think but blue and orange is really going to appeal to the runners in Div 1 who just want to run, who just want something that's a bit more straightforward, a bit more flat, even if it's a bit longer. And for me personally, I really like this route because you're not doing all that micro adjusting with navigation, going through that really messy part in the north. So I think there's a bit less thinking to do here, especially because Div 1 is such a long time. It might be a bit nicer to just kind of go on autopilot a bit and have more of an intuitive route where it's a bit harder to make serious mistakes. And as we continue down blue, we're going to come to this similar fork where blue goes off there and orange and black go down Shoebridge track which, if you remember, is the major kind of nav decision that you could make in Div 5. So Shoebridge Track, for context, is this kind of single, very overgrown, single black dotted trail. So look, by this point, you would hope it's daytime for Div 1. So this might be a bit easier to see than for Div 5. But again, this is definitely missable. So that's something to keep in mind. But looking at the elevation gain on this graph here, orange is definitely the best route to take. You are missing some BERT and you are finishing earlier than this blue one. So that's right, Jacob?
Yeah. So orange is a little bit longer, but definitely the flattest. So it's only 2,800, whereas basically every other route you see here is above 3,000. The orange route, even though it's almost 20 k's longer than the full Bush Bash route, is still flatter. And so I agree with you. It really favors teams who are wanting to run. I guess one interesting thing is that, you think if you head south, you might have escaped shallow crossing. Not quite. There's still quite a significant creek crossing here at Cockwire Creek, which is calf deep or knee deep. And so teams will be getting wet feet and probably wet knees either way, which, I'm sure is a great start to running Div 1. And I guess the only other thing is if teams don't pick drop site and head the opposite way, head out east, which would be an interesting choice given Majors Creek is west, it locks you into the southern route because you can then take one of these trails down here, you add a couple of Ks on and you get back to this southern route. Or you can kind of face your mistake and, hang your head in shame and run back the way you've came. But that's never fun. So I think if we see teams heading the wrong way from drop site, out of drop site, they will then probably swing around and take this southern route once they figure out where they are. But yeah, it should be a really exciting race for Div 1 because hopefully we'll have a couple of teams taking this southern route, a few teams picking their way through the exclusion zones here, and hopefully all kind of coalescing around these last 10, 15 kilometers.
Yeah. And I think the great advantage of Div 1 just having so much distance covered is instead of, your team being suited to the div, I think you can actually kind of pick, you have a great amount of control about what you want here. So like if you feel a bit more confident with the nav and the hills, you can go north. And if you really want that straight running, you can go south. So I think teams will really play to what they feel like they want to do on the day.
Yeah. And I would definitely agree with your point about the mental side of things. I will say this isn't straightforward nav. It's not quite autopilot. You still have to be checking all the intersections, but you're right. You really are just kind of picking your direction and going in it. Whereas here, I know personally, I wouldn't kind of plot a straight route. Like you'd kind of run to here and then make another decision about which way you want to go. And yeah, I think this northern area here will definitely use a bit more mental energy than this southern one where you can kind of just go for it.
Yeah. I think most excitingly though is probably the potential for the shortest ever Div 1 with 74 Ks. If you take all three of those bush bashes, that's pretty awesome to have a Div 1 that's nowhere near 100. So I hope maybe a team does that.
I think what's more awesome is the fact that you could take all three of those bush bashes, run only 74 kilometers, and if you muck up a bush bash or a slow through one, because these guys are going to be doing these first two definitely, and maybe even the third one at night time, you could still lose. Like it's only 15 extra kilometers and it's flat, and you could still lose despite only running 75 kilometers. And I think that's the case for as well with Div 2 and Div 3, and even Div 6, where you can do these bush bashes that save distance, but it's not a winning bush bash necessarily. And so I think it will be very exciting to be able to watch different teams and watch this across the whole course.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's all there is to say for Div 1. So we might have to go back to our old favorite, which is, of course, the Corsetto Continuum. So coming to our second iteration of the Corsetto Continuum, and I think just because we just finished one, let's go back to one. So we've decided to put one in the middle here. And yeah. I think this is kind of hearkening what we were saying before, right, Jacob? There's kind of two good routes.
I think there are enough. There's enough with route choice that it is definitely navigationally challenging. But I also think that, as we pointed out, like if you take that southern route, it really is just a run. And so I just think it's not that it's navigationally, it's hard, but it's not that hard. I just think it is a really well balanced Div 1. Like there are lots of different options, and you can choose whether you want to make it basically just a long run where you kind of follow the signs, or whether you want to go into full on nav mode, and bush bash your way through 3 different times. I think part of the reason that it's not any further up the navigationally challenging scale, and a good point of contrast with 4, which we'll get to in a second, is that yes, we talked about all those different routes. At the end of the day, we're talking 200 meters of elevation, 300 meters of elevation, 3 or 4 kilometers, over 100 Ks or 90 Ks. It's not as big of a deal. And so I think because of that, because it's so long, like the distances between all those different options are minor, relative to say Div 4, which we've put higher up the Corsetta continuum. Because in this one, if you pick, the difference between 2 different routes is 500 meters of elevation, and that is a big thing, especially when we're only talking 60 and a bit kilometers. And so I think that's why we've put 4 at much more navigationally challenging.
Yeah, much more weight. And exactly. Like I think you're still going to be in that state where conserving your energy matters so much more. Whereas one is that endurance, just like, yeah, sure, okay, you've been trashed, but everyone's still got another 50 Ks to go, so who cares, right? But Div 4, I think every single choice is just amplified because it's just not enough. There's not as much time remaining. Everyone's still going to kind of be on their A game a bit longer. And of course, there's also that really important choice of shoe bridge track during nighttime. So whilst kind of teams are going through that during the day with Div 1, at night, that shoe bridge track really saves a lot of time, a lot of vert, and it does matter that you're paying attention and that your navigation is good, because if you're not, if you miss that, then you are deciding the race maybe for your team. So I think it's just higher stakes. I think it's the best way to put it.
Yeah. Then I think on the other end of the scale, we've got Div 2, which we are putting more towards the full-on foot race. And I think the reason for that is that, as we saw when we said, that yellow flat route that goes along the river road is just so much better than everything else unless you bush bash. And I think you kind of have to take the 2 of them separately, because bush bashing, yes, it's great and it's an option, but if teams don't see it from drop, as we discussed, or it can often be kind of an afterthought of, oh, we're halfway through, we're a bit tired, oh, we can bush bash, rather than planning it from the get-go. And so I do think, that yellow route is just so much better that Div 2 could become a bit of a foot race. I wouldn't say it's a full-on foot race, but it could well be a good foot race.
It's getting there. Yeah, and I think I think that's important to recognize, because that yellow route is kind of the point of difference between 2 and 3, and without that yellow route, 3 actually becomes, I think, a bit more balanced when we're looking at the different routes. Of course, again, those bush bashes are always going to save you time, always going to save you vert, but again, they are technical, they are tricky, and they might end up actually making it longer for your team in the long run. So
I'm not always sure they do save you time. Definitely distance. I can agree on that. But
yeah, I mean, on paper, you can always save distance, but how much time you save is up to the skill of the navigator, I think, definitely. And I think that will be the great separator as well. Who's been paying attention on these row gains, right? Who's actually been training up these skills and who just wants to run. So
who's actually been qualifying for these row gains? That's this will really test that row gain nav qual score.
And who's getting into that team of 5 who that suspiciously is being led by one person? IB is an answer of many questions. So that's just our opinions. What'd you say?
It's a great note that we can finish this on, I think.
Exactly. I think so. So that's just where we would rank those on the Corsetta continuum. Again, noting that this is our opinions and our opinions only, and you may have different thoughts, and so do the Corsettas, I do imagine. But I think this is just a good way of comparing them.
You may not care.
You may not care at all. And to be honest, if you've made it this far, congratulations. I'm truly impressed with how much you can listen to us talk. So without further ado, I think we might have to wrap up, Jacob.
I mean, we could keep talking for hours, but I guess if you've listened to this whole thing and haven't had enough, IB Live. Alex and I are both going to be commentating along with others. So yeah, tune in, please.
That's right. Please. Otherwise, back to Ariel and us.
And that brings us to the end of this evening. Thank you guys so much for making it this long. If you've made it this long, we know that you've got an early morning rise in the morning, or if you've just run as well. We thank you for watching us all the way through, and thank you for bearing with us if we got your names wrong or if anything happened on course. Good job. Good job for making it this far. And I wouldn't be the comms officer without a little bit of promo for the communications for this year. You can see the link on the side. We can keep up to date if you're on race day, if you're not there in person at Endpoint. Keeping up to date with all things on IB Live is the best way to do that. IB Live this year will be commentated by some of us here tonight, as well as Toby Kitchen, Hayden Tang, we've got Ellen Tari, we've got Jack, Con, and Mira, all going to be commentating from around the globe. So it's all going to be a really great race weekend, and thank you guys for joining us for this evening.
Well, I guess before we finish, do either of you have any predictions supporting, what are you hoping, how are you hoping IB weekend pans out?
I know I'm going to be supporting Wright the whole way through. I'm very excited that they've got so many dibs in this year, and I'm going to be backing them all the way as an ex-Wright Hall resident. I'm very excited for this year. Alex?
Yeah, I mean, look, I can't say I won't be supporting Bruce. The previous winners of last year, I think they got an extremely strong squad, so my money's on them once again. Jacob, who are you backing this year?
Well, as much as I would love to say Bruce Hall, Best Hall, I think all the teams are really strong this year. And I'll be honest, I'm not going to support anyone. I'm going to support IB. I'm going to be like Switzerland, where I am at the moment. I'm going to stay neutral, and IB is going to be the winner. And on that note, I think let's call it here.
Okay, well, thank you very much again for tuning in. The rest of the commentation will be on IB Live with the live blog. Look forward to it, and we'll see you at Endpoint. Goodbye.
See you at Endpoint.